Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Magnanimous Collective. I'm your host, Sean Kubota. Let's start this off with a deep breath into the belly. And let it go. Oh yeah, dropped in. Today I have a very special guest, a living legend. He's one of my buddies who I respect and admire greatly. He's a teacher, he's a leader, he's a businessman, he's a healer and technician. And I don't use those words lightly. A lot of people claim to be things. This man is very humble, but he's also very assertive. He's very brave, he's very courageous, and he leads with firmness, but with tranquil calmness. He's the water to my fire. He is a real estate investor. He is a men's work leader. He's a conscious community leader, and he's also a biohacker healer technician. Please, everyone, help me welcome my man, Kyle Jones, a.k.a. Kai Kai. Thanks for being here, bro.
Nice to see you, buddy. Thank you for having me.
Coming all the way, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is my brother from Los Angeles, born and raised, and yet now he's Kamaina, brought over on Maui. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. We got a lot to talk about. We were just talking for a bit, and I was like, okay, maybe we should just hop in here. So, Kai, I know about your story, but for our viewers, tell us a little bit about your arc. I know, from what you were born with, how that ended up, your whole entire life, like we just recently talked about, like how you were in high school. You're much leaner now, obviously. And then that big pivotal moment where, you were faced with everything, and how you've navigated that towards not allowing that to potentially be the end or the victimization of Kai, but what's actually allowed for you to sprout and thrive and grow into who you are.
First off, thank you for having me, brother. Super stoked
Honored.
Right now. And yeah, for me personally, my story starts out coming out of my mother's womb. As it starts for all
Wait,
of
what?
us. As it starts for all of us.
Thank you, Mama. Oh.
I was born with a heart defect. So at 7 days old, I had open heart surgery. I was born with tetralogy of Fallot. It's a pretty common nowadays defect.
Okay.
But when I was 7 days old, my dad actually told the story when I saw him last week and how nonchalant the surgeon was that operated on me. And he's like, yeah, we're just going to, he's got a hole between his heart, his two ventricles, and we're going to come in, we're just slicing him open like a cantaloupe. And
God.
And my dad's like, what are you going to do to my 7-day-old baby?
Yeah, holy shit, bro.
And he's like, yeah, we're going to do that. And so da-da-da-da-da. And
gruesome.
At 7 days old, went through that whole process. Fast forward to 15 years old, I had a pulmonary valve replacement. And then fast forward to 23 years old, I had a near-death experience where basically the scar tissue on my heart reacted a certain way and my heart rate accelerated substantially. And so it's
And when
been
you
a
say
roller coaster.
substantially, I appreciate you having a nice flow here, but we got to get to substantially because I've heard the nitty gritty of this. Tell us what happened.
So basically, when I was 23 years old, I went to the gym and I felt normal on that day, but things started to feel a little weird. I started to get lightheaded. I went to the bathroom, I threw up, and it was this really interesting sensation that I kind of had never felt before consciously because I'd been in ceremonies with medicines and breath work and all these things for years.
Okay, so at this time you had already been in the conscious community space. You've dived into psychedelics as well as like plant medicines. So it's not like you're unaware of what purging could feel like and or just like that whole process, but this was different.
Yeah, this was about surviving.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, my body started to feel really off. I purged out everything that I had taken before the gym. Yeah. And I started to sweat uncontrollably. And so I'm like in the bathroom trying to figure out what's going on because I'm feeling like, oh shoot, I'm embarrassed. I don't know what's happening.
Jeez.
And I hear this voice in my head and it's just once and it says, ask for help. So I'm like, oh, that was really clear. Can someone help me? And so they bring me out of the stall and I'm in the locker room now and I'm laying on this surface, this bench. And as I'm laying there, that was when I realized like, holy my heart rate is completely just through the roof. And so I'm laying there and it feels like a phone is vibrating inside my chest.
Jeez.
And so I hear the voice again, just breathe. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to just keep breathing. That's all that I'm going to do is just keep breathing. And this trainer walks in and he's like, hey, I've seen this before. Were you in the sauna too long, bro? Da 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 da. And I'm like, how do I tell him that I'm at a critical level right now without losing focus on my breath right now and what's happening here?
Yeah.
And so I just tell him, I've had open heart surgery. And he immediately looks and he goes, okay, I'm going to call 911. Luckily, the fire department was right across the street from my gym.
Wow.
So they were there like 2 minutes, basically.
Wow.
And when it's a heart thing, they're usually really responsive, but they hooked me up to this device that will function as an EKG, but also as paddles to shock me as well.
Right.
And when they hooked me up, I don't know what the numbers were, but they were probably up over 250 beats per minute. And when we're doing cardio,
crazy. We're
at like 170 if we're really healthy, 180 if we're a little more chubby, like 190.
Yeah.
And
250 is insane.
We're up there, and I'm just continuing to breathe. And the firefighters look at each other, and one of them goes, is that for real? And they're like, check the leads, check the leads. And so they check the leads. They're like, oh, those are good. The leads are solid. They're like, that's real. We got to go now. They put me in the ambulance. They shoot me down Lincoln Boulevard to Santa Monica, UCLA. And the whole time, I'm just breathing, watching what's happening.
Like breathing as calmly as you can. Deep breaths.
It's almost like I was in a really deep state of meditation while my body was starting to die. And so it's a really interesting sensation where there's just this acute awareness, right? You know, when we do dangerous things as like men, our bodies respond in a way that keeps us focused. And all connected that adrenaline to the moment. Yeah. And so I felt that, and the paramedics are there and they don't know what's going on. My heart rate is so high, they can't tell if it's VTAC, ventricular tachycardia, which is a heart attack, or atrial fibrillation, which I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure they had to do something different for each one. And they couldn't tell by how fast my heart was going.
AFib is usually not that fast. Wait, hold on one sec. I just, some of our viewers they've never had a medicine journey experience. They've never done anything psychedelic. Like maybe the most they've faced their own mortality in a way that is at a more spiritual or reflective level would be something like food poisoning or something. I feel like nausea, there's something always there where you're inside of yourself feeling like, what the heck is happening to me, right? Like sometimes any type of like traumatic incident, breaking your finger or something like that, that's like, holy crap, something's happening to my body. And sometimes the adrenaline and everything like that, you can't feel it at that point. But when you have something like this specifically, where you are in the space of reflection inside of yourself, like, oh my God, what's happening to me? I'm potentially about to transition, about to die. You were breathing throughout that whole time and when we say breathing, you are consciously keeping yourself calm and maintaining a certain level of composure very intentionally through basically your heart going, right? And what I find really interesting about that is that most people would feel that and freak out. Like you said, you wanted to tell the guy, how do I say this while still keeping my calm? Because who's to say that a person panicking in that moment wouldn't have exacerbated it to the point where they're just and done. So I know it's kind of commonplace in the, communities and spaces that we come from to understand that. But I find that to be really powerful in that if you hadn't done that work, previous to you having this experience, and if you hadn't had that certain level of, like, honestly, warrior space, and in that moment, you kind of have to face it. It's either like, all right, I'm going to freak out, bad trip. I feel like that's kind of similar, right? When people have bad trips, it's like they're trying to run from it. They're panicking, they're freaking out instead of just confronting the darkness or confronting the thing and breathing through it. And in this case, you were breathing through your own potential like mortality. And I find that really amazing because I wonder if, in these instances where people are having these issues, whether it's a heart attack or something like that, if the panic starts to set in or whatnot, is that what exacerbates it? I don't know. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. I really feel like the connection that I'd cultivated to myself and creator or spirit or whatever we want to call it is really what kept me present and dialed in.
Yeah.
Even as my kidneys started to shut down and my lower organs started to hurt because they were getting starved of oxygen.
Right.
So my heart's so high, beating so fast that it's starting to burn through all the oxygen in my body. And so the paramedics don't really know what to do.
You felt your organs hurting?
Yes, from inside. So it felt like I had like lower back pain back here.
I see.
And like front pain.
Yeah.
And I was aware of it and just telling them, this is what's happening. I'm hurting right now. And I could basically pull myself out of the pain, communicate, and then go back into the pain and be with it while continuing to breathe.
Right.
They get me to the emergency room and wheel me in, and I was like, oh, this kind of feels like I'm in Grey's Anatomy right now. It's like, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, they kind of set me up for this thing they call a cardioversion, which is when they shock you, they stop your heart, and then they restart it.
Right.
And I'm just in this state of pure observation, kind of aware that I'm probably going to die.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just present with what was happening. And I was like, oh, they're setting me up for something. And then there's this guy, and he's kind of like overseeing everything. And he's like pacing, and he's looking like, oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, that guy looks nervous. Just like objectively, he looks nervous. Like I could read everything in that moment for what it was.
Right.
And it looks like he's waiting for something. So they're prepping me for this thing they call a cardioversion to stop me. And then all of a sudden, this other guy comes running in with glasses and he's out of breath. He's like, I came all the way from the other side of the hospital. What is it? And the other guy looks relieved and he goes, give that a listen. You're never going to hear that again. And they both put their stethoscopes to my chest. And the guy with the glasses, his mouth just drops open. And I'm looking at both of them and I just start, oh no. So that was what I did. I started laughing because they're like they're seeing a ghost. And I'm just like, whoa, this is kind of humorous. And I start laughing and they're like, get him ready. Yeah. And so they get me ready. And that was where it got really interesting. And so the next thing I know is there's a space and it's white and I look down and I'm not in my body anymore. And I look up and there's no thought. There's no feeling. There's no knowing in that space. There's only being.
Right.
But from being, curiosity is born. So the first movement is the word, which is like this like the wantingness for more to come. So I'm like, And as I grew curious, I started to notice the space start to pulsate. And there began to be like more form to it. And I started to notice, oh, there's like other presences or beings in this space with me. And all I hear is, I am, that I am, that I am, that I am, that I am. And as the light flows over, I start to feel like, whoa, this is a lot.
A lot of what?
A lot of what I had always wanted to experience.
Like love?
Not
fullness?
necessarily
Wholeness?
love.
What is it?
Being in connection with everything, but without having to be anything other than what was there right in that moment.
So like pure contentment beyond what we can even rationalize.
No desire, no thought.
Yeah.
Just there.
Yeah.
Right? In the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Right? So sound is the first movement across space. Exactly. that gives life and form and separation. And so as I noticed other things in this space, I started to feel that connection to that same space. And then the next thing I know, I'm back in my body. And they're waking me up.
This white space that you were saying when you're not in your body, were you viewing yourself above your body or were you in a completely different
There was no
plane?
body.
Yeah, gotcha.
It was straight to where things come from.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little different than some of the other experiences that I've heard.
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because I've had, we both know we've been cosmonauts. We've journeyed and traversed many planes in regards to medicine work and psychedelics and all these things, right? And there's that like space of download, this space of like the Alex Gray type of portal space, the DMT space, LSD space, where it's just like, I've become a full space of consciousness, like a sphere of consciousness where I'm able to, you're not seeing just in front of you. I'm seeing in every single direction as a sphere, and it's just infinite interweaving. Like it's hard to explain in words, right? And through that, gaining just like downloading like of what we are, all these things, like just pure, in there, that space. I'm not saying words right now, but I know that you understand what I'm saying. I know you understand. And I've had two specific instances. One of which was actually they've both been in sleep, and they've always been when I choose to, for whatever reason, in the dream space, actually meditate in my dream. And align up. And I've come to this space where it is it's beyond brilliant white, because you wouldn't even classify it as white. And the weird thing is about it is that nothing feels foggy or gray, or even in this reality. I feel like we always test our reality as kids and even as adults, because we're like, this looks trippy. Like it looks real, but it also doesn't, and so we're like breaking stuff. But in that white space, there's a full knowingness that this just is. And so I'm curious, we can't know, but in that space, when you were there, like I've been in those halls where I'm like, I know who's here. I know what this is. And I've also risen up and seen like an entity, like a version, a personal type of God figure in a chair with like cosmos behind them. And I'm just like, is this really, how can this be happening? And then it just all goes away in that space of doubt, and I lose the presence of being there. But in that space, it's just like, I've been not mortified, but just like sort of terrified, and also in awe of things being more real than anything that I felt here in this human body and or anywhere else. Is that somewhat in the same vein of this white space that you're in?
Yeah. Even when I say white space, it doesn't even feel like I'm describing what it was, but that's how I tell it now that I'm like back in my body.
Right.
But yeah, there's this like infinite beingness that underlies all things.
Yeah. It's not made of matter. And it's not a figment. It just is. And it's just like, what the fuck is... I don't know. Okay, yeah. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah, everything exists within the mind of God, basically, right? And so even in meditation, and we've seen it in Eastern traditions and all these different cultures, how that space can be accessed. And even some of us that have like actually done the like deeper components in a more like stable way have accessed some of those places. Yeah. And now kind of where I'm at is from that experience, what really matters. Because I spent so much of my journey through consciousness and self-development and growth trying to get out of here. Right. Trying to be beyond this place.
That whole narrative of the ascension and
your higher self.
No ego and all this. See, this is where we relate, because we've been through it. We've been through that that ascent, that like saviorhood / the monk, the egoless monk, all those things. Yeah.
It serves a purpose to push one's capacity and increase one's sensitivity, which is super...
It's part of the path.
Beautiful. Yeah. And what I learned from this experience was that this is what matters the most. Yeah. And that space is outside of time. Yeah. Even calling it a space is weird to me.
It is.
But it's outside of time. And so that wasn't the first time that I heard those words and had that feeling of connection and beingness. Yeah. The first time that I heard those words were in scripture class at Loyola High School, 3rd floor, Loyola Hall, Jerry Fermento's class. I was sitting in the back row. I read those words for the first time when I was 15, and I had no context for what I was feeling in that moment. Yeah. And I felt crazy. And then when I had this near-death experience and came back, I was like, oh, that beingness is outside of time. Yeah. So because it's outside of time, when I read it back then, it didn't hold it. I hadn't experienced it yet. Right. But the I am that I am is the seat of everything. And so there's some really powerful magic in the Bible and some really powerful truth to these sacred texts. Yep. And some of us get the opportunity to experience it, and it not without a cost. Yeah. Not without a significant cost. You know, me personally, like I'm covered in scars. You know, I'm like,
I've seen them.
I've got massive scars all over me.
Well, and then this guy.
I got my nice little defibrillator here underneath my left arm. He sits there. If I go over 250, he hits me with a shock.
Can we explain that a little bit deeper? Because it's not, you don't know what it actually, like I've seen it in millions of occasions. Like, tell us.
So it's a device designed by Boston Scientific. I was one of the first people to get it. Yeah, pretty much. The guys that make the calculators made the device that technically could save me if it happens again. Yeah. And so when I was 23, I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks after this event. And I had to wait for this special surgeon who was like the only one that could do this stuff in the country, basically, or one of the foremost electrical heart doctors in a way. And he put this thing in me, and I've never had to use it. It's never shocked me. I've been able to keep moving forward, but basically it's this computer here, and then it runs from a wire like here to here. And then if I go over 250, it'll hit me with a paddle shock that'll hurt like crazy. I've never had it hit me, and it's been 7 years since the event. But it's just there, and it kind of keeps me safe, since I am a bit more of a risk taker, and you know, my family knows that I'm a risk taker, so they like convinced me to get it, even though I'm like, I had the mentality that like, oh, Western medicine is bad and all of these different things, but emergency care, it's the best in the world here.
Integrative medicine is where it's at. Yeah, we need both. You know, we can't just treat the symptom, right? Yep. But also something that I wanted to, you know, mention when I was like asking about that, like what, you know, similar to one of our guests, you know, who like lost his large intestine and has a colostomy bag, like this device that you have here, it like protrudes out. Like you literally have like a box thing protruding out from your side. Yep. And like you said, you're full of scars, and yet you wear them proudly. The funny thing is, as much of a risk taker as you are, you're also like the most like smooth, silky, like tranquil being. And yet, like, you know, you haven't let it stop you. You haven't let it push you back. If anything, it's also, like you've said, it's helped you to integrate, you know, what we had been through in regards to that, I don't know, whatever you'd call it, like spiritual seeking individual who's gone through those levels of archetypes, whether that be the monk, the egoless monk, or the individual seeking enlightenment or nirvana, ascension, saviorhood, being the rebel, you know, being the victim, all these things. And so I love that. I love who you've become. And post that, you've also been, I mean, one of the ways that I knew you was through holding conscious community events, and then through Sacred Sons and men's work as well. And I feel like all of that's very intertwined in regards to like who we both are and who we've become through all these experiences, especially through the reflection of our partaking in the conscious community, or that type of archetype of being and growing out of it, which is that we are fully, you know, engaged in commanding and creating our own reality in every moment, right? In the sense of like how we respond to it and perceive it, not necessarily what's being thrown at us, right? But tell me about how that landed you there, aside from just, you know, recognizing these things. Like, what was the point where you were really like, wow, okay, I'm not a victim in any way. I'm choosing now consciously where I'm going to go with this, and how's that led you to everything that you're doing now?
For me, I've always felt different. I always felt like, oh, okay, everybody else could get girls, but I'm like covered in scars. Everybody else could like run a mile on the track, and I got to have a heart surgery when I'm 15 years old, open heart surgery. And so for me, there's always been like this feeling of I'm broken. And it wasn't like, oh, your dad did this, oh, your mom made you feel this. It was like, no, like God did this to me.
At like a physical, like root level.
Yeah. And so I couldn't justify why. I couldn't justify why, like, why did this happen to me? And then I started to, as I met different people in the community, but really when I stepped into men's work with Sacred Sons, it showed me, oh, I see how my challenges have really forged me into someone that can kind of be a turnkey leader in a way. Yeah. Because I've constantly not able to fit in. Yeah. when people are like, oh, we're going to prom, we're going to this, we're going to that, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to live another 10 years. And I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And my family had certain expectations of me to become someone, something. And I couldn't meet those. So I fell into this like victim trajectory and woe is me. No one understands. I'm the black sheep.
Yeah.
All of these different pieces.
No one understands. That's a big one. Yeah.
And then I went to Sacred Sons and I started to learn like, oh, there are other people with challenges that they've met.
Yeah.
And that are still happy as a result of meeting those challenges. And so I started to really like access those components of myself and like let them shine. And so for me personally, with that experience, been able to learn how to read people super effectively, understand them, track them, because everything was a lot more acute after these experiences growing up of like, why am I so different? So I'm constantly tracking the difference between me and someone else.
Yeah.
And now when I'm in these retreats, in these environments, I'm tracking what is different from them to me and how can I bring them to where I'm at? Because I've been able to integrate a lot of these components that I once carried as my cross.
Yeah.
Now they're a source of not so much pride, but I'm able to own them.
Yeah.
And really be like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't have to lead with that.
Yeah.
Because Creator, God, Spirit gave me these challenges.
Yeah.
So then that way I would never blend in. I would always stand out. And that was really, really tough. And now it's like, I can't blend in. And I'm able to own that and accept that.
Yeah.
And so the invitation for a lot of people is like, how can they accept and own the aspects of themselves that they felt have been limiting and then access them more, right? Because there's limits that we perceive mentally. And I'm not talking about like the delusion of like, if I jump off this cliff, I'm going to fly. I'm talking about the limits of like, the limits of like, oh, okay, if I do this, there's a risk involved. Even creating the show here, there's a risk involved. But what if? What if I fly? What if I believe in the capacity and potential that Creator's given me right now?
Yeah.
And if I lean into that, then that beingness becomes my anchor and support. Not other people's expectations, not other people's validation, not a bunch of money or fame or success. But what if I just did it for me? And then if I do it for me, what will Creator bring through? Right? And it's not about me being a healer or me being of service or all these like buzz phrases that are super common nowadays.
Yeah. The egoic, selfless, whatever, savior.
I'm not selfless.
Yeah.
I love me.
Yeah.
It's like no one's going to understand. I've met a lot of people that are like, well, they just don't get it. And there was a part of me that wanted other people to understand me. But even if they understood, like none of them can understand because none of them have been through it.
They're creating their own story of your story.
And then it's like, oh, okay, well, they didn't really get it. So then I go on to the next person. And in reality, it's not about me having people understand me. Yeah. It's about me being who I am and having a deeper understanding of other people around me, how I can support them where they're at, how I can love them where they're at, not in a selfless way, but in a way that's kind of selfish. Like, I'm going to be of use and you're going to be of use.
Yeah, purposeful.
And we're going to do this together. And if you're not going to ride, then goodbye. Because that's what this place is about.
Love and boundaries, baby. Agreed. That's what's up. Yeah. One thing I'll say, my invitation, because I feel like in the conscious community and all these things, buzzwords, like there's so many different versions of pride, right? And yet some of our words get caught up in the negative connotations. And I feel like, ego or like pride, for instance, might be caught up in one of those, especially in like the, conscious community context. And I think pride, having the ability and the capacity to have pride in something in an honorable way, in a way that speaks of merit and virtue, is actually like worth living for. So when you say, you're not sure if it's pride, I'd say I invite you to be proud, because I think it's something to be proud of. I find it admirable. And I think that's it. If there's something that we can be proud about, it should be admirable. It should be a virtue and merit and something difficult, something that's been overcome, a triumph over challenge. Like that's like the shit, you know? And, you know, when you're talking about this willingness to do something for the self, you know, we have to fill our own cup, right? We have to put on our own mask in the airplane before we can help others. And also, as you're talking about, you know, really being able to have the individual come to the capacity of showing up. I'm in full agreement of that in the sense of like, there's no way to quantify. Like I always make this coffee shop analogy of an individual coming into a coffee shop and ordering a cup of coffee, waiting for it, getting it, leaving, right? There's two trajectories. Well, there's infinite, but there's two very polarizing trajectories. One of which the individual has, let's say, just lost their job, lost their car, broken up with a girlfriend. I don't know. Anything, right? Name, fill in the blank, ad-libs. They come in there acting like a victim. They come in there feeling, oh, woe is me, all these things. Oh, life's ruined, basically choosing in that moment to respond to what's happening outside of them and being like, you know what, I'm going to choose the misery story. Whether I'm doing it subconsciously or unconsciously or consciously, I'm choosing it. And then going in there, all woe is me. Oh, everything's against me. Completely devoid of having any awareness or understanding of what's around them. Getting their coffee and going. Just like continuing the misery story. Because, hey, if it feels good for them to do that, fine. They can choose that. We're all having that choice. It's always available. And then there's the opposite, where they're like, okay, where's the blessing here? If we don't see God in all, we won't see God at all, right? Like, so being in that space of like, okay, I either choose that this is a blessing or this is a curse. I'm consciously making this choice. There's no way to quantify whether you do that and you show up in that space and you go to a coffee shop or you go to this thing. There's no way to quantify whether or not you will meet a person that could be your next business partner or connection to a business or connection to a romantic partner or whatever. Just make your day a really nice story or, you know, have a pet play date. I don't know. The options are infinite. There's no way to quantify that will happen. However, one thing that we can be sure of is that showing up as that person is the most advantageous space to be in for that possibility to ever occur.
Exactly.
Right? And so once again, the same individual showing up in that space of like, hey, I got this. The tragedy begets opportunity. Some good's coming my way. This tragedy happened, just like my car getting stolen and me being able to like have a little bit of float to do this and do everything that I'm building right now. It's like, I could have been like, oh my God. And it doesn't always happen that way, but who knows? Like if, you know, we always find the arc in our story later. And I think the really big theme that I found with a lot of the individuals that have come on here is that like, if we don't value and treasure the time in the journey, we miss out on all of it. And then until it's after all the events have occurred and we're like, oh wow, during this whole entire time, I could have been like chilling out. I could have been enjoying. And instead now I'm able to see, oh, this led to this awesome thing. And that would have happened anyways. So why didn't I just, instead of being in misery, getting myself sick, doing all these things, I could have just been grateful and enjoyed and created and connected and loved and done all these things. But instead I was like, boink, opportunity.
Yeah.
So
welcoming pain quells suffering. Right. So me personally, it's like I've been living at the edge. Yeah. The edge is painful. The edge is scary. But if I welcome the fear, the scariness that comes with pain, then I'll never suffer. Then I'll eventually, at one point, move forward. That opportunity will come, right? So suffering is a choice. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. So people that are in this mindset, I've been there, of victimhood, they're choosing suffering, not welcoming pain, wanting to like asking God to treat them with kid gloves for most of their life. Right. But guess what? Creator's like, yo, you're meant to be great. So here comes the thing that's going to bring you to the edge of your limits. Can you stay there? Can you live there? And that's the thing about this world is it's so easy to differentiate yourself because no one wants to live at the edge. Everybody wants to stay comfortable. Everybody wants to be loved. True. Everybody wants to be validated, recognized, to be showered with positivity. Yeah. But being at the edge, whoo, it can be fun. Yeah. But it's also lonely because not many people want to stand there.
Yeah, it can be lonely. But then also like the actual, you know, friendships, the actual connections that we do have are so much deeper. And I think this goes in line with what we were talking about earlier in regards to romantic partners, but also in interpersonal relationships as well. It's like once you've gone there, like we can call it like, once you're awake, you can't go sleep and be like, arrogant assholes about it. Well, at least that's my judgment on myself saying that. But truly going into those depths, it's kind of like playing in a kiddie pool and you're like, hey, have you actually been to like the deep pool where you can go and dive down, and have you seen the bottom? There's so much like literal analogous, but also like literal depth there where you're able to traverse so much more. You're able to connect so much deeper. And I like what you said about pain and suffering, because for one, I love that. It makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that's been a big theme for me is, and this is something that I've learned through Sacred Sons and Kale as well, is that grief is that pain that so many of us don't want to necessarily tap into, or like we feel it. We're like, oh God, let's push that away. And yet we're living in a society that is so lacking in regards to gratitude and humility and virtue and all these things. I feel like virtue and merit and honor and righteousness and all these things come about naturally through humility and gratitude. Mm-hmm. But to access gratitude and therefore bring about the offspring of humility, we have to be connected to grief. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting in regards to like one of my clients talking about veganism or just the aspect of mortality or all these things, and like pain being like, oh, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to touch it. It's like our ancestors didn't have a choice. She was like, well, all these animals having to be killed and stuff like that. I'm like, how do these people do it? I'm like, people around the world do it and they don't think about it at all because it's a part of life. But you also see that some of these people living in small villages, they're like killing chickens every day. They're doing whatever they got to do. And yet their family is so close knit. Why? It's like, how come? Oh, it's because having less makes you happier. Not necessarily. What actually allows for us to be deeper in gratitude and humility is actually accessing that deep pool of grief and being connected to it, not sobbing all the time, but literally being humbled by the grief, having it always open and allowing for it as a conscious walk, just like it is for us to be in that creative space, to access that gratitude. Similar, like I always think of Kale going like, right? Because truly, I've said this a lot in the podcast, but like there's these, we've both been there, the follow your bliss, and like
namaste,
yeah, no,
brother,
right. But like really in that space of like, oh, I'm following positivity. It's like positive, just trying to escape from the darkness, trying to escape from the pain, right? It's like, that's not true gratitude. Mm-hmm. If your gratitude is thrown off, whether or not, some minor thing happened, like, oh, everyone's closed, or like some bullshit, you know what I mean? I know you and Ollie would be really mad about that.
It was closed yesterday. I wasn't happy about
it. See? No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? Like when we're at this space, like, feeling that, you don't care about any of the bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when people pass away, or when someone's really sick, or something big happens, everyone drops the bullshit and all the trajectories that they were on that were potentially for self-validation or, trying to, create something in regards to having more self-worth and everything like that. And they're like, whoa, okay, yeah, not every day's assured. Wow, humbled. Wow, what I really want to do is connect with you right now, and I really want to love you. And I'm sorry that I haven't made time for that.
Yeah, grief was a big theme of like my near-death experience.
I'm sure.
It was really interesting because my pops, we haven't had the best relationship most of my life, but he was always there for me when I was like in critical condition. And so when I was 23, basically they had to make sure, they were monitoring me. They had to make sure my heart rate didn't keep going up randomly for any reason.
Right.
But I was like vegan back then, and I was like seemingly super healthy. So they had me on these heart monitors. And when I would go to sleep, my heart rate would drop under the normal threshold because I was so calm in my rest state. And then it would trigger the machine like, oh, his heart rate's too low, warning, and it would beep. And so I would get woken up. And so I didn't sleep after I basically like died and was revived,
Yeah.
I didn't sleep for like 2 days straight because they wouldn't turn the alarm off of these machines. And my dad stayed with me the whole time. And there came a tipping point where I broke down and he saw me and he was extremely upset and he yelled at the nurses and was like, look, you know, I understand that you need to get the doctor's approval, but like, this is what's happening. You can see he's fine. And now he hasn't slept for 2 days and he just died. So like, what are we going to do about this? And they finally agree. They can see we're both super distraught. They finally agree, okay, we're going to turn off the thing. And I'm in the room and I'm crying because why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like, why? I can't even sleep now.
Yeah.
And like, now I'm here and I don't know if I'm going to live and I got to get this thing implanted in me that I don't even know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm just breaking down. And my dad is super stoic. And so I told my dad,
I wonder where you get.
I know. No, he's awesome. And I look at my dad and I just say, why me?
Yeah.
Why me? Like, why is this me? And he looks at me and goes, if I could trade places with you, I would.
Yeah.
And he starts crying.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I saw him cry. And I started to realize like, oh, he's just like me. He's really suffering in his own way. He's really challenged in his own way. And so I hugged him and I held him because I realized like I was chipping away at his capacity to hold me. And he didn't know why it was happening. And in that moment, we connected. And that grief is what really changed our relationship because it wasn't great up until that point.
Oh.
And with him now, things are amazing. And he's super supportive. And when I was with him last week,
Yeah.
we were snow skiing and catching up. I see him like almost once a year because I live far away now. And he's saying to me like, oh, don't worry, you can go ahead. I don't want to hold you up, da-da-da-da-da. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, like I came to ski with you.
Yeah.
Like I want to spend time with you. And he's like, no, it's okay. Don't worry.
Yeah.
No, I'm old now. Ha ha ha. And
Yeah.
I said, no, like I came to ski with you. I'm going to ski with you. And we're going to hang out and we're going to have fun. And so we're going to spend time together. And I told him like, it's my job to honor you
Yeah.
because you taught me how to do this thing. You taught me how to ski. You were patient with me for years. You gave me all these opportunities.
Yeah.
And he just says, okay.
Yeah.
And he goes quiet.
Yeah.
We ski another run. We get back on the lift.
Yeah.
And he goes, you know what? I just want to thank you for what you said about honoring me. Like thank you. Like I could tell he never had anybody say that to him in his whole life.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I said, yeah, totally. Like, do you know how many people made sacrifices for us to be here right now?
Yeah.
For us to do this? So yeah, I'm going to hang out with you. I'm going to honor you and we're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
And he's like, thank you. And then we were both quiet. And I saw like a little sparkle glisten in his eye.
Yeah,
And I was like, oh, he feeling it. Just like I'm feeling right now, you know? And so
That's so beautiful, bro.
the grief is the access point to the relationships that typically we don't want to mend.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing is that once I came into contact with my father's grief
Yeah.
and heard his stories about his father and his grandfather, I'm so lucky to have him.
Yeah.
He really blessed me up, even though he's a type A, direct dude,
Yeah.
driven dude, really successful dude. But he had to be that way because he had to do it for his.
Did he have a choice? It was do or die. Right?
Do or die.
We have the saying, strong men or hard times create strong men create easy times create weak men create hard times. And I feel like you and I have both been blessed to be, multi-generational here to the point where like our families had gotten to a certain level of success. And now it's our turn to not only like start to heal our lineage, but also, what's the next chapter? What's the next level up? It's not just more financial success. It's like actual spiritual, mental, embodiment is really what it is, along with all of that. So for one, thank you for sharing that. And it's so great. It's so great. Yeah. Let's just take a breath into that for a second. want to say to everyone listening, a part of the gratitude, a part of the tear shed, a part of what really comes up there is that, and I think this comes in a lot in regards to procrastination and perfectionism being just another form of procrastination, in that some of us delude ourselves. And if you're a perfectionist or if you're a procrastinator, you potentially can reflect on this and relate to it. In that notion that we have more time, we take ourselves out of the presence that our time is not assured. And it's something that I've dealt with for a lot of my life. Like this is a lot of years in the making, just doing this podcast, doing everything that I'm embarking on now, and all in perfect time. But with that, for those viewers who are watching, like, if we're going to be completely accurate, precise, humble, truthful with ourselves as to whether or not tomorrow is assured, today, the rest of you don't even have the rest of today. Like, do you? I don't know. Is there a way to quantify that you do? And with that being said, an invitation for everyone to connect with those that you love and love them and be present with them and accept them for where they are. Mm-hmm. Because when it does come to that space of losing the ability, the capacity to connect with those we love, we're not in the space of like, oh, well, I don't have regret because, they were annoying about, I don't know, the dishes or about this or that, all these little minor nitpicky things, or like we didn't agree politically. All we would have is regret that we didn't connect and love them more while they were here and honor them. And there's a really interesting thing about boundaries, once again, and loving through boundaries. If we're able to hold boundaries with those that we love, first with ourselves, because we have to love and hold boundaries with ourselves, but also with those we love. For one, the one way that we can affect them appropriately towards positive change, and the only way that we can, is through embodying what loving ourselves and having loving boundaries with ourselves look like. And then from there, also having boundaries with them that are still loving. And not blaming them for instance, like, not agreeing with us, whether it's politically or on what type of music we like or something like that, but being like, hey, look, and I've made this analogy with dogs because I'm a dog guy, as you know. Mm-hmm. Mother dogs, when they have puppies, they will snarl, they'll nip at the dogs and all these things. They're not being mean. What they're being is very clear in a way that enables the puppy to get, like, this is the boundary. Mm-hmm. This is the boundary. Know the boundary. And then after that, it's pure love. And so how can we establish healthy boundaries? And there's a way to do it. And I'd love to ask how you do that. But we can establish healthy boundaries with individuals and keep the container so that we're just able to love and just fully be there, instead of having to be like, oh, well, it's not perfect, so therefore I don't even know how to connect, because it'll never be perfect. I even think with our relational or our romantic partners as well. So with that being said, with someone who's very clear, and also in regards to men's work, I think we should maybe talk about that a little as well, as to, like, when you were talking about tracking, like what we actually do in that space, but also how can people, in your opinion, create healthy boundaries so that we can just love fully and not have those, interrupt the capacity to connect or love?
Specifically with men, it's what I found is looking at the relationships between them and mom and dad, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Then from that point, we can see, like, oh, okay, I don't believe in myself because I've sought dad's approval and he hasn't given it to me yet. Mm-hmm. Or mom over-relied on me, and so now my job is to please mom, right? So typically the first step is looking at those patterns and then turning around and looking at the more present relationships, romantic, close friendships, and seeing, like, okay, where am I over-pleasing, and where am I not believing in my capacity that I have value, and that if I speak up, they're going to stay and receive it. Yeah. Right? So those are like the internal mechanisms to check out and look at. Once those are looked at, now I know romantically I can be like, okay, you're going through this, I can set up frameworks. And for me personally, like in my romantic relationship with my beloved, I'm very upfront and I'm very direct. And I don't always have the best delivery or tone. I'm going to be honest. But
what kind of that, like your father? You know?
Yeah. Pops taught me well. He taught me really well. And he's from a different time.
Yeah.
Right. And so in this day and age, it's really important to provide frameworks for relationships, especially men entering into relationships. What is the framework of relating? Yeah. Right. So it's like during the week I work these times. Like if you're going to contact me, it's got to be over like a 7 on the scale of like, I need you, please answer the phone. I'm going through it. If it's not over a 7 and you still want my support, then it's like, cool. Like I've already, like we walked through the process. You're aware of how to self-regulate. So the invitation is to self-regulate. And if she doesn't know how to self-regulate, then you maybe haven't made the best choice when it comes to romantic partners, because most women nowadays don't necessarily know how to self-regulate. And that's kind of true, especially in the conscious community. Yeah. A lot of it isn't about self-regulating. It's about disassociating from the feelings and underlying issues. Yeah. So I'm inviting her, go sit with yourself, and then let's talk, like when I'm on lunch or whatever, and we can drop in on it. Yeah. And she'll be like, yeah, thank you. Like, I feel better now. I just want to bring this up and we'll talk about it. And why do you think that's the case? And I'll ask these questions. And because now she doesn't have that emotional charge built up. Yeah. Because she sat with herself. Yeah. And even if it's still built up, she's sat with herself long enough to now know how she wants to approach the conversation. Right. So that framework is really important, because a lot of times men are being relied on to be that emotional support. Right. While at the same time being criticized for not being open with their emotions. Right. And vulnerable and connected. Yeah. Right. How am I supposed to be open and connected and vulnerable when you're taking up all the emotional space, all the emotional bandwidth in our relationship? So the invitation is that you know how to regulate. You do it. Unless it's an emergency, I'm going to drop everything. I got you, baby. Yeah. But you regulate, then I step forward, meet you there. Yeah. When we have the space and time to do so, never let it go past 24 hours or anything. Yeah. We meet it, we're able to connect in a way that hopefully has some depth. If it's like, oh, I was projecting this on you, but it actually has to do with this. Yeah. Or if it's like, I didn't like the way you said that. Okay, I can receive this feedback now because now I'm present with you, versus if I'm thinking about work and you're interrupting work, I'm not present and you're being vulnerable. Now your tension is going to multiply, and that's where the explosions start to come in. Right. So in romantic relationships, that's important. And then in friendships, for me personally, I don't always do the best about communicating my boundaries. It's something I'm still learning with friends. Yeah. But now I've been learning, like, I have high standards and I'm confident that the people that I choose to be in my life can meet them. And I also have enough awareness and tools to support them in getting there in their own way. And I can ask those questions and be supportive and be connected to them through their process, even if it challenges them to meet parts of grief within themselves. And so those friends are friends that I know I'll have forever, because we can stand at the edge together with grief inside of us. And so those are the most important things when it comes to setting boundaries is, can you implement frameworks? This is purely from the masculine, but can you implement the frameworks necessary to navigate those pieces? And then can you pick the people around you that will trust you enough to listen? Yeah. And be like, okay, even though I'm upset, he's the king of the kingdom. So I'm going to just like respect him and talk to him at this time when he said. A lot of times in romantic relationships, the mentality is happy wife, happy life. But it's happy king, happy kingdom. Yeah. Because if I can remain objective and disciplined and consistent and focused and actually create the resources, then we're gonna have that family. We're gonna have those resources. We're gonna have that lifestyle. We're gonna have everything that we've wanted and more, because now you're an asset. You multiply the value that I create. I don't have to worry about what's for dinner. I don't have to worry about what you're feeling, and you're holding it in and you're going to explode in 2 days.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about those things. So now I can remain present with the direction, purpose, trajectory, and then she'll directly benefit and she can co-pilot me with me and we can ride together. Mm-hmm. And so the invitation for men is always choose yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you choose yourself, the outcome will benefit everyone around you. And I'm not exactly sure at this moment what women should choose. Mm-hmm. But if we look at what's happening in modern times, the outcomes that most women are desiring are not tangibly manifesting. Mm-hmm. Right? So what is out of alignment?
Speak to that more clearly, what you're referring to.
Let's see. If you're watching this and you if you're watching this and you identify as a boss babe, ask yourself, do you want to have a family? Mm-hmm. Right? Because you're wearing the pants in your life right now and you're operating from a masculine energy. Mm-hmm. And that energy just can't turn off because, oh, now I've met the dude that I have a crush on and he should choose me because I'm going to now put up a facade of femininity. When in reality, after being in a relationship for a couple months, that masculine energy comes out and now you're nagging and now you're trying to control and now you're doing your da 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 da. And then those men that typically are in those relationships with those women get distracted from their purpose because they don't feel loved and they don't know how to kind of be like, look, stop.
They don't feel supported. They're having to deal with another issue instead of actually focusing on the bigger
because we're trying to solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
And be in support of the people that we love.
Well, some of us, but yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'm projecting. Most of the people watching, hopefully.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, with the feminine, it's really important to slow down and really ask yourself, especially if you're in your like mid 20s and you're like now entering like late to mid 20s, start making that shift. Because I have friends that are in the 30s to 35 40s, range that are super successful, even make more money than me.
Yeah.
But they're like, I don't know how to find a guy. I don't know. Nobody meets my standard. All of them have to make more money than me. But like most dudes don't make over 6 figures. Right. Now you do. So now those dudes don't even qualify for you.
Right.
And so most women have become the man that they want to marry. And the invitation is, if you're still in the phase where you haven't become that yet, slow down, look at what your grandma did, look at what your great grandma did. Yeah. And if you can harness some of those innate components, then men like me and you and the men that were around at Sacred Sons, the very successful embodied men, they're going to see that and be like, oh, okay, her. Right. I want to go talk to her. And they will. Yeah. Because you're going to give the signals and that essence is going to radiate off of you. Yeah. So the invitation is like, there's almost a direct pipeline that I've noticed with the whole like boss babe culture. That's basically a multi-level marketing scheme where they all sell each other courses to become the boss babe. So I'm a coach and let me coach you so you can have your coaching business. But now you're coaching about this thing.
That's kind of the coaching program in general.
But then you use boss babe rhetoric or feminist rhetoric to now get them into the funnel.
Neo-feminist rhetoric.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily the old school feminism. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. So then once they're in the funnel, they're like, oh my God, I made 10K last month. Yeah. Like, I got to keep doing this and making videos that push the rhetoric that made me the money, that keeps making me the money. So it's this funnel that sends women straight to like dog mom, cat mom land, basically.
All right. Well,
I know.
No. I mean,
you asked.
I did. And I completely get it. We've talked about this at length before. And one of the things that's come up for me in regards to all of this is where's the responsibility on the men, right? And so the interesting thing is when we think about, OnlyFans, right? A big thing is OnlyFans, right? Before, years ago, there were like lots of suicides from girls who had their pictures leaked, in high schools and stuff like that. Now they can't wait to jump on that bandwagon because they're going to make thousands, millions of dollars from selling their nudes and all these things. And so, but the crazy thing is, it's like that only happens by the perpetuation and support of weak men. And so when I used to think like, man, there needs to be a strong woman who can stand up and help lead Sacred Sons type events. And then I realized, it all starts with us. And I was thinking about it, and once again, like blessing or curse, like what's the choice there? And I also looking at I think of it the nice way I think about it is like the room's really messy. The room's gotten so messy that we're like, we got to clean it up. And I feel like that's where we're getting to. Yep. And I feel like, there's a narrative where it's like these women will be cat moms or dog moms or whatever, because no one will want to be with them because they've, done OnlyFans, or they've just been super slutty or whatever, or they have tons of bodies, or they're super masculine, right? And then I think about growth edges. I think about individuals who have had transformation and what the future holds. And I don't know what the future holds because it's so freaking weird, and it's just gotten increasingly weirder, that who's to say that this like baddie that's super bossy doesn't get with some super, feminine kind of beta Asian dude from Asia who actually will appreciate her, and he's too big. Like these polarities actually merging or something, because there's people in other parts of the country, like men, who are just completely emasculated, and that needs to be reframed. And then we have super masculinized women. You know what I mean? And so, yes, maybe some of them will be cat moms or something. And I also hold the hope for, after we look at the distortion that's been created through not being attached to grief, not being attached to pain, not being able to like be in the gratitude and humility and do the things that are hard and have merit and value in the things that are difficult and hard, instead of selling butthole pics, instead of men who have gotten really rich off of crypto or tech or whatever and are now just like, I don't know how to talk to women, I'm just going to pay fucking thousands of dollars because I'm making, there are people in cybersecurity making millions of dollars a month. Them throwing down like 10 G's to get a girl's OnlyFans or get like a private show or whatever the F it is nothing to them, right? But that's where we're at. But if that man is able to be affected, so that they don't spend their finances on that, and is actually being loved and cultivated, and the society is not sick in order to have him be at that space where that's his only means of connection to the feminine, then that whole business doesn't exist. Then that pathway and trajectory doesn't exist for these women. Because if we are in the space of being leaders, if the man is the lead, right? Then for me, it starts with men. And like, I feel like, okay, well, shit, all these men are enabling this to even exist. And yeah, and so with that said, I feel like hopefully after we've seen everything, after we've been like, oh, wow, this got really messy. Let's actually not let, women or men who have transitioned to women compete against women in Olympic events because it's unfair. Like, I'm not saying don't have competitions for them. They can do whatever they want. And yet when it comes to that stuff, we've tried it out, like Leah Thomas, for instance, with the swimming thing. And then we're like, okay, actually, you know what? This actually isn't fair. And so I feel like hopefully we're getting to that space. And that doesn't mean that there's not room for love. That doesn't mean there's not room for people to integrate in a fashion that is healthy and loving. Because there's always been two-spirit, There's always been the, what did they call it? The dakini. There's always been like the sacred, prostitute type of archetype. There's always, that's like a healer archetype, right? That's always been there. And how have we, through the taboo of it, or through the not wanting to confront the shadow of it, created this distortion and this perversion, and then had it proliferate into what it is now. So all that to be said, I just wanted to like put forth that reframe that I hope that thought comes about, where it's like, oh wow, this actually isn't the way to do it, and the potential trajectory could be a life of loneliness. And I hope that it doesn't have to be. I hope that just as some of these women who we've known who are really amazing healers now, a lot of them came from sex work and or like being strippers or stuff like that. Like a lot of the womb healers, I was stunned to find out that like near all of them were like in sex work or being strippers. It's like, and it makes sense because just like us being wounded men or just wounded people in general, and like being confronted with the path of like, do we choose to heal ourselves or choose to just be like a broken victim? And those that have ascended and chosen that space of healing themselves then end up having the wisdom in order to heal other people, right? So anyways, I just wanted to put that out there.
No, I totally feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the responsibility is ultimately on men, right? And so what we've seen over time is a systematic breaking down of men.
Yeah.
Through putting certain chemicals in our tap water, through the shaming of like Me Too, and not to say that that movement isn't justified or valid.
Yeah.
And that things didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it's the overarching fear, right, that I could be the next one.
Yeah.
Right. So I better conform to the projected feminine standard now.
Yeah.
Right. So what we've done over time is consistently, and we've in music, men aren't shit, no shit, that no shit, da 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 da.
Right. Right.
Right. So it's like over time, men have been systematically broken down by media.
Yeah.
And then women have like adopted the media viewpoints.
Yeah.
Right. And so what's happening now is there's a huge movement of men that are like, no, we're not going to go in that direction. We're going to do what we got to do, become the men of substance that we were meant to be.
Yeah.
And then we're not going to compromise on the standards for the family that we're going to create with the women that we are going to choose to love for the rest of our lives.
Yep.
And there is an opportunity to heal. And there is an opportunity to grow. And I don't think anybody is a lost cause ever.
Yeah.
But there has to be an acknowledgement around accountability.
Agreed.
Right? So it's like, if I'm a loser, life tells me I'm a loser because I get no attention.
Right.
I'm probably overweight or eating Cheetos in my mom's basement or doing all of these things. That's what it means to be a man. Like, if you're a loser, life already shows you you're a loser because
It's a reflection.
But if you're the opposite, and if you're a woman, what does someone who's not an embodied, aligned woman look like? Even nowadays, they're put above like successful men.
Or men who are helping truly keep the country running. And when we say that, the jobs that are risky and dangerous, the underwater welders, the people who work the oil rigs, the people who do all the construction, right? Not to say that there aren't women in some of these fields.
I work with all those people in property management. All the men that work with me, it's like those are
dangerous jobs.
The people that I'm relying on, and it's super hard to find talented and in integrity men that can do blue collar jobs. So like, I'm running my business and I have my set crew that I work with, and it's really challenging to find men that have blue collar jobs, and now I have to pay even higher prices for them. And those men that are doing blue collar jobs are going to make more than men getting arts and sciences degrees and humanities degrees and marketing degrees and all these other things.
And they're often family men as well.
Typically. And so, but that's kind of the tricky part is those men don't have perceivable status in the greater society. So like eventually they will because they'll have the means. Right. But
they haven't been chasing that the whole time. They already have a family.
And they're like grinding and they're making 90, they already have a wife. 6 figures. Well, that's the thing is some of them are more traditional. They already have a wife. But even if they don't have a wife and they're like now grinding that out, they're still the same simple man. They're still the same hard worker. They're still the same man that he's not going to be as complex and intellectual, but he's going to be able to provide way more than the arts student musician or whatever who now can't find a job or is kind of working out of school. Not to say that anything is bad about that. It's just women are asking for or raising their standards, but then choosing men that can't meet the provisioning standard. And then shaming men who can't meet the standard or shaming men in general and saying, well, like they can't meet it and I'm this or that. And so the onus is on men. The responsibility is on men. But there's also a level of accountability, right? So if you're going to, for women, if you're going to go in the direction of like being a successful business boss, then like most men who are successful, really successful business bosses aren't going to want a really strong masculine woman who they have to argue with
they never do.
Every single week.
They never do.
They want a nice nurturer who's going to take care of their kids and listen and just be like...
Opposites attract. Opposites attract. And I'm a complete... I've lived this experience where I've had a woman who's super empowered and super argumentative and super combative, and I'm just like, I love you, you're freaking gorgeous and everything, and oh my God, I cannot get anything done. And every time that I've come back to it, it's been completely just like, I derail. because I'm spending so much time, once again, like you said, trying to, you know, help regulate this person because they can't regulate themselves. And touching back to this, I feel like what you're saying in regards to like women do this, I also feel like that's like the archetype / mentality that's perpetuated throughout society, especially through media, right? Specifically like music, and just like media dramas, all these things and blah, 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 where it's like, this is the empowered woman. And lots of traditional feminists are like completely in disagreement with how neo-feminism is operating right now, because they're like, this isn't what we fought so hard for. This is once again a perversion and distortion of the true right. One thing is that confidence is not boastful and arrogant and obnoxious, right? It's solemn and it's content. And yet here we are in a society where irregulation of emotions and acting out and tantruming and being so obnoxious and facetious and arrogant and all these ways of just being like really just uncouth and dishonorable, that's glamorized. That's you being empowered. You being super sexualized and putting that out for the world to see, even when you got a husband, that's being in your power. What fucking shit, bro. That's bull. I'm sorry, I gotta say that. Like, that's not. Not having to do that and yet still having all of what we're talking about. That's it.
I'll die for that woman. I'm serious, because that's what's on the table, right?
Yeah.
It's like, as men, it's like if someone steps to her incorrect or tries to do anything, there's the very realistic possibility that I could die defending her.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm being asked to like put my life on the line and lead.
Yeah.
But then if like we're in an area where it's unsafe and you're not aware or you don't know how to listen, then you say something or do something or act out of pocket to the person in line in front of us or behind us or whatever. Now my life is at risk.
For what?
Because you weren't, when I said, yo, stop.
Yeah.
You didn't listen and stop. You kept running your mouth or saying whatever you wanted to say. So as men, we're making the ultimate sacrifice. And as women, like, they're creating or incubating and bringing forth life, which is also an equal sacrifice.
Yeah.
One that I don't undervalue.
Yeah.
But I just want the sacrifice that I'm making to be valued as well. Yeah. And respected as well.
Agreed. Yeah. I don't wish for war, and I didn't go into the military because I didn't believe in the war. I mean, I saw 9/11 happen. We both did. And I saw it in school. I'm like, oh, they did a building demolition. And then like, oh, they melted. I'm like, what the fuck? Anyways, point being, I'm not for war because I know that it's just all business. It's all for like, gaining, land, money, all this stuff. And yet I feel like if we do and were to have a draft, all of this shit would stop. Exactly. Because the thing, and I had what you're talking about in regards to being a protector. I had this conversation with my partner. And I will say that I'm mortified at the fact that there are some men that would jump behind their woman in the face of danger. I'm like, what? Like they can't be real, but it is real. But one of the reasons why there was a certain level of respect for men previously in traditional times, and also this is something I wanted to touch on now that I'm talking about traditional times. Let's be real. We were and have been misaligned in regards to that traditional space for quite some time. So for individuals, women, men alike, to be like, hey, we can't go back to old times because it was, misaligned in all these ways. It was toxic in all these ways. Valid. That does not mean that going the exact polarity is the solution. It means that aligning it, tweaking it so that it's refined, but that there's balance in the polarity, and it's just tightening that up. So anyways, back to the draft, right? If we were to have a draft, I feel like all of this stuff would completely just fall to the wayside, because back in those times, men had the potential to go to war at any given time. And because of that, there was a certain honor and virtue in regards to the space man would hold. And I had this specific conversation with my last partner where I'm like, hey, look, this is the deal, okay? Obviously, I've been a warrior my whole life. I've been a fighter my whole life. I didn't really play sports. I did judo. I did fighting. Even regardless of that, if anything happens, someone comes in here, when we're sleeping, or someone's on the street and messing with you, or anything at all, I'm first line of defense. Just because that's not happening does not mean that or just because it's not happening in the present moment, does not mean that that level of responsibility ever fades or diminishes in any capacity. It never does. Hopefully we never have to go there. But the point is that when it comes time, I'm in that driver's seat. That's the space that I hold. And so with that, the fact that you are not carrying that responsibility, what are the responsibilities that you carry just eternally, right? And I feel like that's been lost. And, you know, the talk of the draft that just recently happened, there were a lot of these like Gen Zers who were like, fucking, I'm not going, all this stuff, which I get because I'd be kind of like messed up about it too. Cause I'm like, I don't want to fight that war. I would love to fight honorably. I would love that. If I had to protect my family, I would die. It's the most honorable death I could have, really, is fighting for my family. And all of this stuff we're talking about, whether it comes to racism, like everyone fought in World War II. Native Americans fought. Japanese Americans fought in World War II against the Japanese. Like all that stuff goes out the window. All these notions that we're talking about in regards to gender, sexism, feminism, everything would start to shift if we were actually confronted with, once again, the grief and the pain and the mortality, right? So anyways, I find that really fascinating because all it takes is a minor just like, you know, chink in the thing for the whole thing to blow up, because we've been creating this very elusive state of human consciousness because of the fact that things are calm for a relative period of time. And we're thinking that it's always going to stay that way. Is it? I don't know.
It's pretty interesting because there's a lot of talk around like, oh, I want a man that's growing. And so some women are already in relationships and they're like, well, he's not growing. And they start pushing. He's got to be this. He's got to be that. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And how many men have I met on weekends at retreats where it's like their wife sent them and they got value from what showing up?
A lot of them.
But a lot of them are also being like coached and guided by their wife. Yeah. And kind of being told to heal in a way that is not conducive necessarily or natural for men to heal with. And that's kind of been a really interesting push, is like, I've watched a lot of men go through really amazing transformations with men. And I've watched a lot of men earlier on in my journey be nagged and hassled by women that thought they were better than that man. Yeah. But then they also chose that man. So it's this interesting paradox where let me skirt accountability and shame you for not being all that I need you to be. But that dude would die for you if it came down to it.
Some of them.
Exactly. So that's the thing, is like, I'm going to say, like, if you're with a warrior and you know he's like a warrior and like you're complaining because he doesn't show you his emotions, but he has close friends that he handles his emotions with, then leave him alone. Yeah. Leave him alone, because you're basically getting, and especially if he can provide like a lifestyle or resources, leave him alone. Let him be where he is and encourage him to keep staying in contact with his friends, encourage him to go work with us if you want on retreats or coaching, like encourage him to work with men, but don't be his mom where he's like, I have to please you just to now get physical intimacy. And then like that doesn't even feel good because it's coming from the space of like, you're not even genuinely desiring me anymore unless I check these boxes. So it becomes like a carrot. Yeah. So then that way, like, it just starts to lead to the end of a relationship. So if you're a woman and you're like conscious and you're like, oh, I'm growing, I'm doing my thing, and I want a partner that does the thing, and you're with this guy, and maybe his thing is like, he's a leader in like this local sports program, and he's like coaching the kids and doing all the things, and like he's running his business successfully, and he loves you and he does care about you and he expresses that. But maybe you haven't seen him cry. Maybe you haven't seen him like grieve fully. That's not for you to see or judge, but judge him by the measure of what good he can do for you and for the people that you love. And from that point, that's where a lot of the like goodness of men can be reconstituted. Agreed. Because the person that they've committed to, that they love, now recognizes, you're enough for me and I'm here for you and I love you. And I'm going to reflect, women are going to reflect back to us regardless, our deficiencies, our incapacities. And then if he's a warrior, if he's honest with himself, he'll take those steps in his own way, in his own time. And sometimes you may have to be patient. He may have to suffer a little bit, a little more. And if he starts entering suffering, don't shame him.
Yeah.
Don't say, well, you should have just listened to me and No. Let him go through it and then encourage him to seek out external mechanisms for him to reflect on it.
Yeah.
Because if it's inside of the relationship, it's often too close.
Yeah.
And if it's too close, then he's not going to feel fully him. You're not going to feel fully you.
Yeah.
And then the polarity dies. Once the polarity dies, now you're just friends raising kids.
So true.
And it's
So
like,
true.
what's the point?
You know, specifically in talking about our brotherhood with Sacred Sons, but specifically, for one, we haven't talked about regulations, so let's talk about that afterwards. But two, when we're talking about men's work, and a lot of you probably don't know what that is or what that means. We yell and scream as a practice, just like literal warrior blood cries. We grieve and have open space for men to confront their grief and the things that are withheld within them. And sometimes that allows for things to pop up with other men, which leads to just what we call processes, where these people just are held in a safe space with men who relate and who are reaffirming, like, you're not the only one, bro, you know? And then when that man is in a space of grief, whether they need softness and that's being tracked, like you were talking about tracking, that's what he's talking about, or whether that needs to be exuded out and be encouraged through the collective, you know, release of everybody, it gives me goosebumps. Because for one, I have the notion that sometimes our women are not meant to hold that. Like, obviously, there's nothing better than being in the warm embrace and nurturing embrace of the feminine. Like, being able to cry with your woman and being able to receive that and allow for her to be that nurturer for you, that's, every great man truly does have a great woman supporting him. That's it. Like, it's a part of the alchemy of it all. And we can be really fucking intense. So in, like, men, the problem is that men can be traumatic just through expressing themselves, let alone expressing themselves in the way that we do at men's work, which is literally what you would, if you were to see it without context, you'd be like, these dudes are insane, because it is full unhinged, it's full release. For men, it has to go there. It has to be that fuck, you know, just to be like, I feel better now. Like, and I talked to this with one of our bros, where he is terrible with communicating back to me, and he's going through a lot. He just had his like 6th kid. He went through a divorce, you know, is with this new, he's working like crazy. All his money's going to his last, all these things, right? And so he won't respond to me until like maybe a month later or something. He's like, bro, I'm so sorry. I love you. You're one of my best friends. I'm sorry. I'm like, it's okay, bro, because I understand now. Go. I sent him BetterHelp because I've been doing therapy with BetterHelp. I'm like, go talk to a therapist once a week for like 45 minutes. Give yourself that, because you deserve that and you need that, and love yourself through that mechanism so that you can empty your cup, so that then when you talk to me, you're not like holding this cup, shaking and it's spilling everywhere. You're like, I don't want to just spill this all over my bro, right? And so sometimes with men, it's like, why don't you open up to me? The guy could literally be holding his cup and being like, if I do, it will destroy everything. You know what I mean? And that's beyond regulation, because even him not spilling the cup is regulation. But a lot of men don't even know of the space that they can empty that cup. And most of the time they'll be in the car, they'll go, ah, and just do a quick thing or break some shit, like, boo. And it's like, oh, my cup's 3/4 empty or half empty. Oh, I feel better than it being fully full. But when is it ever? And not only that, it's the brother's hands being like, bro, we got you. Fully empty this fucker right now. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's really important that men allow other men to hold them in the grief piece that we're talking about, that bonds us and connects us as men, while at the same time letting their partner, their beloved, know, hey, just want to let you know, I talked to blah, 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 and I'm going through this right now. And he gave me some good tips, and I've got some things I'm going to implement and do. And these are some of those things. I'm just letting you know because I love you. I just want you to know what I'm navigating. It's important to remember that weight is made for shoulders, not hips. And men, shoulders, right? So it's like, let us hold that weight with you, brother, on all of our shoulders. So then that way, when you're holding that cup, you can be like, hey, so this is what's in my cup right now. I love you. And I'm just letting you know because I want you to know what I'm navigating so that you always know me.
Yeah.
But that you never have to hold the weight of what I'm navigating. And that's really important for men to implement. And I've told my partner, like, I'm not going to rely on you. I'm not for that. And I'm not going to like go crying to you. I'm going to go to my brothers and then I'm going to let you know. And there are moments where I've been vulnerable and open, but from a place where it's just like, this is my story and this is what I've navigated. And these are the emotions connected to that. But those aren't weights anymore. Those are just touch points for my soul in this human experience. So I'm able to share those parts of me that are connected to my soul and the emotions with her. But the grief's already moved. My bros handle my grief with me. And I don't expect her to. And if I started to expect that, the polarity drops in our relationship. She doesn't feel safe now. She starts to feel like, oh, I don't really like want to have physical intimacy. I'm just not feeling it. Right. But if I show up and I'm like, look, I got us, baby. I'm navigating stuff. We're doing the thing. And I'm taking you to dinner tonight. And da-da-da-da. She's like, oh my gosh, okay. No stress, no pressure. I know him and he's like giving me a great evening. This is amazing. So that's kind of how we can go about navigating things in relationships with grief is definitely step into those spaces on retreats. When you have the opportunity, I've watched men where we're just looking at him, we're like, man, this guy's about to pop. But then they like, they somehow held it together for 4 days straight. And it's like, right? Dang, he's going to go home with all that stuff shaken up now. Like a fizzy can of Coke. And then he's going to get home and his wife's going to be like, so how was it? Tell me everything. And he's just like, it was good. It was good. How do you feel? Oh, I'm fine now. It was great. It was great, but nothing actually changed. And now he's masking.
Well, and now it's all stirred up too.
And then
stuff at the bottom, the sediment.
A few months later, he comes back, or he doesn't.
Yeah, I know, right?
And things get worse, and she leaves, or things just degrade for both of them long term. And so those spaces are huge. And if you have a partner, a man in your life that you want him to heal, send him to male resources. Not like, I think therapy is great, but I think therapy, like talk therapy, is a great complement
100%
to the release and grief processing and intensity.
Oh, it's not
necessary.
the full thing that we do at Men's Week. Not at
but
all.
It's a great like touch point that keeps us
maintenance.
Present.
It's just maintenance. Honestly, I feel like it's like, you know, one of my guests said different. He's like, if you got some solid friends, just, you know, be with them. You don't even just like have fun, give yourself a break from it. I'm like, okay, that's fair. Everyone processes things different. And I feel like it's appropriate maintenance, at least for people like me who, when I'm in the thick of things, don't reach out to friends because once again, my cup's so full and I'm already then I'm just like, I don't want, when I connect with you, I want to be like, what's up, bro? How you doing? Like, tell me about things. Tell me about life. I don't want to be like, hey, bro, can you hold space for me? I like going through all this stuff and then just brr. Because that's not, that doesn't feel like the relationship I necessarily want to have with you unless I really need you to hold that container. And I can do that. And it's also like, I could also just like have a space, a receptacle for that water, this like icky water that I can pour out with someone who's already, you know, has a filter or something like that. So that then when I'm with my friends, I can just be with them and I don't have to pour that onto them. That doesn't mean that when time really comes that I don't call upon my friends. But for maintenance stuff, just like, all right, cool. I'm emptying my cup every week. Cool. And then I can be with the homies. And then when I got really big things, I know who to go to. And yeah, I definitely say male resources are so important for men because, like I said, like we are that intense and it's beyond regulation. And speaking about regulation, like we know these terms and yet other people don't, right? And we're living in a world, like I said, where people are just it's glamorized and popularized and perpetuated throughout society that throwing a tantrum and acting fucking just so immature, right? Truly doing a tantrum is being empowered, or is speaking out, or, you know, or writing, for instance, or doing all these things where it's just like, I'm upset and this is me being empowered. It's like, to a level, it is being empowered. And this is actually something that I talked with other people about, and I haven't said yet, which I think that you'll agree with. The rebel, and the revolutionary, and the severe altruist is not the final tier. It's actually still caught up in saviorhood. It's still caught up in victimhood. And I feel like right now, that is kind of the mainstream consensus, is that woke, that like rebel, that person is the top, like we are the awakened ones. Like, nah, y'all still sleeping. You're snoozing. Take off the snooze button, because the true awakened is that sovereign, is that embodied, is the content, is the doing the work to form these boundaries that you're talking about, you know, do the things necessary so that we can regulate, do all these things. But when we say regulate, like that's really what it is, not regulating our emotions, taking time to sit with them, taking time. Like when I get charged, oh my God, I feel so charged. And I've been going to these clubs dancing. These people be bumping into me. They be coming like right in front of me while I'm like dancing hard. And I'm like this, and I'm just like, oh, I feel so insulted. I just want to like, I have to regulate myself, because I don't normally, you know, usually keep space with each other. You know what I mean? But imagine if someone were to just like come right in front of you and like while you're trying to work out or something and just like mess up your workout, you'd be like, yo, what the fuck are you doing right now? That's how it feels. And I have to regulate that. That was just to illustrate what regulating is, and also the opposite is what we're seeing in society. So anyways, in regards to these altruists, this revolutionary of like, oh, rebel against it, tear it down, burn down Babylon type of thing. It's like, is that really the answer, or is the reframe, is the pivot, is the refinement of what's here and the growth from it the solution? Because that's what I think it is.
It's really interesting because I've been getting into like agriculture and like some of these other components living in Maui.
Yeah.
And I had my mind blown like last month around like syntropy, and it's how all of these different components work together. So a lot of the people that are upset right now, revolting, all of this stuff, they're still operating within a finite model. Right. So they're like, even the spiritual rebel, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, we'll God's saying that we got to tear everything down. It's like, but God's infinite. So typically, if God underlies everything, then the infinite model can never be dissolved. So true change happens through the infinite model, right? And in Hawaii, we have all these like invasive species. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, how can we work with what's here? And so I've been working with a nonprofit that specializes in agroforestry. And I've been learning about how even the invasive species have a specific function within a vertically integrated model, right? So we start with our bananas, they gather the water and they prepare the soil. And then next to the bananas, we're growing things that will fix the soil, mend the soil, attune the soil. And some of those plants that we're using are invasive, but they're there and they're going to continue being there. So why not bring them into a function that is infinite? Right? And so that system of syntropy is really the infinite model that we're looking to create socially. And so everybody that's like revolting, activism is a solution, all of these different things, it's like you're functioning within a finite model, attempting to attack a finite model, because to what end will that serve? True. It only creates destruction, and if destruction continues to happen, people ain't going to eat. And then you're going to complain more about people not eating, and then blame more outside forces for people not eating or businesses not having jobs for you. And then it's going to continue to devolve over time. So the infinite model is
which is the actual
necessary
burning of Babylon in the way that is not wanted or desired.
So the infinite model, nature already holds it. Right. And even in those ecosystems where we have invasive species, like we're living in a city where immigrants are coming in and all these different things, like same exact thing is happening. Right. But if we have a vertically integrated model, it can become harmonious. But But the thing is, the system, the government, the state is a finite model. So those people can never really be vertically integrated.
Yeah.
They can only really function in disparity unless they unless they get lucky, or they work hard for like 2-3 generations to get themselves up to where the people that were already native species like are at already.
Well, and sometimes the native species aren't doing so good either. Like that's one of the weird things is a lot of people who are here will blame, once again, external forces. And it's like, if you actually look at a lot of the immigrants who are here, they're way more content than the people here surviving with a lot less. Why is that the case, you know?
Every business model that like can change the world has to be based on the infinite model. So even if you have like a retreat company and you're like doing things all over the world and you're scaling, but you're functioning like the Mongol Empire and you're conquering territory after territory to get more people, to make more money, to do more things, that's going to die with you. Once the second 2-3 generations away, your model's going to die out, and what you did will have made an impact. But for people that are like, oh, I'm going to change the world for the future 7 generations to come and all these different things, how do we harness the infinite model within business as well, right? And so we at home, typically we're looking at commodities, water, food production, because if we have access and freedom in those commodities.
Yeah, and energy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, there's like even ways to kind of navigate that as well. But yeah, there's limitations with energy as well up until a certain point. So the biggest thing that people could do to be revolutionary is learn about commodities and how to create infinite models and frameworks that are sustainable long-term, that their kids can inherit so that they don't have to slave away every single day. And we're lucky because our parents made certain decisions and sacrifices, and our grandparents made certain decisions and sacrifices within the finite model to give us the opportunity that we're at right now. Yeah. And you know how you said, oh, the 3rd generation is where everybody forgets and then it repeats again. Yeah. But I think we have the opportunity right now so that it doesn't have to repeat. Yeah, it doesn't have to. We can utilize the resources and position and awareness and acuity that we have now to bring this infinite model online and create more syntropy, which is everything functioning in harmony, but nothing being the same. Right, right. And that's kind of the opposite of what the system is pushing now, or society is pushing, is everybody's the same, everybody's equal. Yeah. No, I'm different, you're different. And yet here are the people to blame. Exactly. Right? Like, let's accept everyone, but also blame these people. It's all these people's fault, which is completely a paradox. And, you know, synergy is the key. Yeah. Yeah, I hear that completely, and I agree. And well, let me start off here. My mission is to gain common consensus and bring about awareness that we're all making a choice. I don't feel that I don't want to, and it's not my right or responsibility, duty, and once again, severely not my right to try to shift or change anyone's perspective or save them. Because in order for me to honor each individual fully, I have to honor their choice. And yet, I also feel the duty to shake up everything and say, hey, you're all making a choice. We're all making a choice. Let's just make that common consensus so that we're not playing this crazy, weird game where everyone's acting in this weird thing where we're like, oh, I'm powerless. It's like, no, you're not. But if you want to create that movie, if you want to create that story, full respect and honor for you to do so, right? Because you're that powerful. You're God's child. You're Creator's child. Like, you can create that fully. You can believe that, and that even proves my point that you are that powerful, right? But let's just cut the slate. Like, let's cut away the veil. We're all that powerful. We're all creating everything. We're all making decisions to perceive our reality and then dictating actions through that. That is it. That's the free will, right? And in the midst of that, there's, through owning that accountability as a whole, even though many people will still choose that misery story, you know, that trajectory of the victim and all that stuff. Even in that, there's still the capacity and potentiality for us to have really solid boundaries, right? Because when we talk about the immigration thing or just society as a whole in regards to, like, if we think about vandalism, right, and that being loosened in regards to boundary, does that really help things? Like when it comes to reprimanding a child,
Just not doing anything and letting them just scream and tantrum, is that the solution? Because, being mean, once again, bringing up the dog thing, like there's love and boundaries. In order to have full love and depth of gratitude, once again, we have to have boundaries there. We have to face the finite and the mortality of the thing in order to appreciate it. And then through that, we're able to connect to the infinite, right? Like you're talking about. It's like in order for us to actually connect to that space, we have to actually confront the end result of what we're creating. Otherwise, we're like avoiding it and being like, oh, I know it's there, but I don't want to, confront it,
Yeah. And the dream is always elusive at that point.
Right.
So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to live on the land in an eco village and like do the thing.
Oh my God, how many times I've heard that?
Right. Yeah. But then it's like so opposite how we live in modern times in a city. And then they're like, okay, there's going to be no rules basically. And then I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
And I've lived in a community with 60 people before all at once. And they had such strong rules and frameworks that it succeeded and it functions as a great business model. But a lot of people are like, let's reject society. Let's have no rules, no morals, no values, no standards for the kids that we're going to raise, no motivation. And then they wonder why the community fizzles out. And now they're like in poverty because they went all in on working off the land when they didn't ask themselves, what kind of person am I? What kind of people do I want to work with? And what's my mission, my long-term end goal?
Legacy. Yeah.
And how can I create frames? So then that way, when eventual conflict arises, okay, we have a council that deals with that.
Yeah.
We have a voting system that deals with that, right? That's the whole function of democracy, is to create freedom.
Yeah.
Obviously, the way it's been utilized and manipulated in modern times has not created freedom.
Yeah.
But the original direction, purpose of democracy is to provide frames so that true sovereign freedom can come online.
Agreed.
And that requires accountability.
Yeah.
Because to be sovereign, meaning having all of the authority and power to make your own decisions in your life, you have to have responsibility as well.
100%.
So authority, responsibility,
100%. Those
two are connected.
Well, and you mentioned it earlier, and I just want to elaborate it a bit because I have I think it's a unique perspective, because when I figured it out, it just kind of just completely tore out any doubt in regards to my own self-worth. But you had said earlier that there's an expectation for us to be great from Creator, right? And one of the ways that I was, there's a lot of we've been a part of personal development or conscious community where it's like, oh, affirmations, I believe in myself, I love myself, which is all bullshit because it's still coming from the core wound that you are not. And the one way that I was able to squelch that infinitely, and where I also stand so firmly in regards to my belief in all of this, is that if we were, we will be parents, we will be fathers, we will want our kids to be more than us. We will want our kids to live a better life than us. We'll actually have that expectation and responsibility on that, and we will love them infinitely and support them in order to achieve that. And yet for so much of humanity, the divine parent, the God, the creator, is wishing the opposite, or at least that's so ingrained within our DNA or consciousness, maybe through epigenetics or through religions, dogma, all this stuff. But if we actually recognize like, oh shit, as humans, we sound a lot better of a parent than this divine parent. Wait, that makes no sense. So if our divine parent wants the same thing that we want, then that innate responsibility to be more, but also the worth is just like unquestionable. All of a sudden the worth is so overwhelmingly present that it's like, oh, I have a duty to do this. Oh man, maybe that's why humanity's refusing it, because it's such a magnanimous responsibility that it's terrifying. And it's so much to uphold that it's like, it's actually easier to be a victim and blame everything else and be small. And wait, yeah, we are powerless, right? You agree? Okay, cool. Let's band together so that we can try to form a reality, a distortion of reality that isn't true, so that we can all be less than. And then we'll just keep proliferating all these distortions, which is basically what we've been living in, right? This like weird society where basically all of these creator, gods, these like, God embodied or offsprings of creation that have capacity of consciousness to create. Look at what we've created. Like at a level we're animals, and at a level we are able to create such amazingness. And yet it's like, oh, we're powerless. We're less than, oh, what am I worth? oh, affirmations, chant on these beads. It's like, no, it's already, it's nipped at the butt in the beginning if we allow for ourselves to accept the narrative of what truly is. Because if we are the offspring of that and we're thinking better for our kids, then our divine, that does not compute. It doesn't make sense.
There are great techniques for calibration, which is going to be your affirmations, your mantras, all of that stuff is great for calibration, right? Because what you're doing is you're attuning to your desired projected outcome. Right? So once you calibrate, it's great. You can even utilize some of those techniques to support your regulation as 100%. You go through emotional waves.
Agreed.
But there comes a time when it's like, okay, I'm going to have to discipline myself and devote myself to doing whatever it takes to becoming the best possible person that I can be. And if I'm like, oh, I'm a healer and I do these things, it's like, and then you're like not taking care of your physical body. It's like, well, now the people that you think you should be listening to you are not going to fucking listen. Those cops that need your support and gifts or whatever, or those firefighters or those first responders or those vets, those people that really need those connective points to go deeper, they're not going to trust you because you don't even take care of your physical body. You're not even taking care of your mind or your emotions. So we have a lot of people functioning from the place of like, oh, this is my purpose, I'm going to help. But it's all about you. It's not about the other person, right? There's one piece I want to bring forward. So the growth and development path, it's this mountain that we're on. And there are these various ravines that we come upon as we're going up the mountain. And so everybody wakes up and they realize, oh my gosh, there's a mountain here. Wow. I wonder what's at the top. Right? And so everybody starts climbing. Some people don't even notice it's there and they keep walking by it and it's no big deal. But then there's...
Or they pretend it's not there.
Then there's exactly. And then there's a subset of people that are like, okay, we're going to go. Let's go. And they get to the first bridge. The first bridge is all about interest. So like, ooh, let me try yoga. Ooh, let me try breathwork. Ooh, let me do this plant medicine. Ooh, let me do this ceremony. Ooh, let me get this session from this person. Ooh, let me like learn about past lives. It's all about interest, the first bridge. So some people stay at the first bridge and they get lost in the interest and that's enough for them. Some move beyond the first bridge and cross it and say, okay, that didn't solve everything. There must be more. Look up there. So they keep walking, and sometimes they have to leave behind some of the people that they befriended at the interest level. So they keep walking, but then there's others that are walking as well. And so like, oh, let me catch up to them. Hey, how you doing? And you start having those conversations. It's like, well, we're searching for something more real than that. Me too. So you guys keep walking. You get to another ravine, another bridge. That bridge is all about passion, all about like taking that interest and using your creativity to bring online your genius. So the second bridge is all about bringing online your regenerative genius in a way. And then from that place, it's like, okay, this is where your natural abilities come out. This is what your inclination is. And most people will start a business or some sort of finite model around their passion and direction. So the successful coaches, all of these different people that are thriving, some of them move beyond the second bridge and keep that model in place because the second bridge is all about sustainability. So to actually cross it, you actually have to have some level of financial sustainability, resource sustainability. Once we're like, okay, did that, I wonder where I can go from here now. Because now I know what I like. I know who is equally passionate to me. And I know what I can provide. I can naturally provide to the world. So those people are like, okay, there must be more. But the third bridge is where everybody starts to kind of like stall out on their way to it. Because it's like, there's money at the second bridge. Even just beyond the second bridge, there's like status. Like, ooh, I'm the most awake. I'm the most conscious. Right? And there's all these different things. But the third bridge is a grief walk to get there. It's acknowledging every single limitation and shortcoming and all of these different pieces. So even if I'm like a prolific healer or whatever, but I still like I'm holding shit against my father or my mother, and I bypassed that. I can never get to the third bridge. So the third, to get there, it's the acceptance of the grief walk. Once you arrive at the third bridge, It's like, okay, what are my deficiencies now that I've come into contact with my grief and I've accepted that this is a component of what it means to be alive, a fuel to get me up the mountain. Now I'm at the third bridge. How do I cross it? I turn around and I look at my deficiencies, not the things that I'm naturally good at. So for me, I'm like a magician and I'm very good with words and all these different things. But in high school, I was 270 pounds. I'm 165 now.
Let's also say, when you say magician, you're not actually a magician. You're talking about the archetype.
I'm not like a card magician, but like I will reprogram your mind pretty quickly. And that's naturally easy for me. So the third bridge is like, okay, how can I cross this if I don't resonate with every single person I'm attempting to lead up the mountain? Right? So those hard, grizzled people that need our support, it's like for me to lead those people, I can't be a fat ass. No one's going to respect someone that doesn't take care of their body. Period. And especially those hard motherfuckers that are like, those are the people you want on your team in a crisis. When the shit hits the fan and blood's flowing in the streets, it's like, those are the people that we want as allies. But they don't trust us because they're like, oh, you know. But if you can conquer those limitations of physically within the self, they become allies and they'll trust your mind now to lead them in a direction that will serve everybody. And so the third bridge, not many people make it there. And when they do make it there, they're like, what do I do exactly? You have to turn around, look inside of yourself and look at everything you didn't want to look at, everything that made you feel not special, everything that made you feel, oh, these are bad vibes, or, oh, this is negativity, or, oh, this is judgment. All of those things are what's necessary to cross that bridge. And then I don't know what's beyond that, because I think that's where I'm at. And I'm still figuring it out and piecing it together.
I love it.
But I've seen some people that I perceive to be across. And everything's operating with synergy. And I don't know.
It's beautiful.
What'll happen.
It's so beautiful. There are specific individuals. For one, love it. Is that something you made up? Bro, the mountain.
The mountain.
Make that your book. I love that. That's awesome. There are some individuals that through me getting, I think we're both in a very similar space. And like I was telling you earlier, me having the ability to now observe myself and see where I have need for refinement. You're like, oh, okay. I thought that me being articulate and being poised and passionate was the thing. But truly it's being engaging. It's being able to be charismatic. It's being able to connect, with the audience rather than just perform in front of the audience, right? And seeing certain individuals who have that synergy where it's just, I would be fearless going up and delivering a speech in front of a crowd. Completely directing, not organizing, that's the wrong word, but directing the entire course of a seminar, for instance, like someone like Tony Robbins, who is literally like, just like, who here is feeling this? You want to address it right now, and really fully go there. And I don't know Tony's shadows, but there's something really special there where I'm just like, oh, I mean, and he's been doing it for how many generations at this point, or decades. But there are certain individuals where, despite what people may say about them and all these things, when you actually get to the precipice of being at that space, of being able to, whether it's through men's work or whatever you do, and conduct people and direct energy as well as like command it, and you see individuals do it to a certain capacity, you're like, oh, wow. So I totally get what you mean. And I love this mountain analogy. I love that. Please make it a book.
I will.
Yeah, cool.
And the mountain's infinite. So it's this.
I was going to say, it keeps growing.
It's this interesting thing where you're like, ooh, the peak. There it is. Right there.
Yeah.
But then it's always eluding.
It's always elusive.
And that's the divine sort of like joke in a way. And also the most exciting part about being alive is that it's infinite. So it's like, wow, like no matter what I do, this is never going to end. That sucks.
An ogre's like an onion, bro.
It's never going to end.
Yeah.
So every joy and pleasure and piece of excitement that I experience, I'll continue to experience for as long as I choose to walk, for as long as I am blessed to walk in Creator's footprints. And it's that simple.
I'm onions. Ogre's like an onion, Shrek, There's always layers. And that's the fascinating thing. I think that, and I'm being challenged with this as we speak in regards to like during this year, it's been less than 3 months and there's been so much change and so much growth. And I have also gone through peaks of like, everything is going awesome and then injury or getting sick. And then going back and healing through that. And it's been like, I've had a year in these past like 2.5 months or something. It's been insane. And so what I find that's interesting about that is that throughout those times where I'm on that high, I'm like, oh, I'm right there. I'm about to break through. I'm about to break through this door. And then something happens and I'm sent back a decent amount. Once again, an opportunity to get caught up in victimhood and, being, oh, poor woe is me, or being like, what's this trying to say? What's this trying to tell me? And, you talking about the cosmic joke thing, the thing that I find funny about all this is that when we're in that space of being poised and being, I don't know, somewhat serious about really holding this space, right? Especially when you say like, oh, we want these guys who are strong and, or not guys, but specifically if you were in a scenario where you want people to trust, right? You want someone who's just going to be assertive and, a boss and all these things. And yet what I found through doing men's work, and I'm sure you agree, because our collective of bros that we really vibe with is so tight because of humor. And so there's a certain level of being able to really, what was that face?
I was thinking about all the jokes that Sean's told me over the years.
I actually, one of our dynamics is I'll say something really out of line and Kai will go.
But I'm also like thinking it internally, so he just like vocalizes my judgments.
Exactly.
But I'm just like a little more conservative.
He's the role model
on it. So then like he's like, oh, I knew you were thinking this. Let me just say it.
Exactly. It's great. But specifically, there's a certain level of trust that's built up. It's almost like being in a band and playing music. And everyone being in sync, right? Like someone could be the most amazing guitar player ever, but if you don't have that synergy, then you're going to do a terrible performance. And I think that's very similar in regards to as we walk through life. Yeah, individuals have to be online and all these stuff, but if I can't laugh with you, if I can't joke with you, I don't trust you. I don't trust to go into battle with you because we're going to be out of sync, Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to bring that note up because you had talked about the cosmic joke. And I find that that's also something that I'm healing within myself, which is the lovingness and acceptance of the trickster in me, and something that I felt that I had to suppress because doing this work is serious.
It's not that serious.
It's not that serious. And is it the spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down, right?
It totally is. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff and watched people move crazy energy. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day, like offline, not with the group, but there's a couple of us that will meet up after the end of the day because we are working separately, and then we'll be like, whoa. And then we'll start cracking jokes about what was happening 100%. Because at the end of the day, it's like, well, we're not in battle anymore.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we regenerate each other through humor. And I think that that's a really important component for men specifically because men are honest and direct. Mm-hmm. So our humor is typically like, like kind of mean, right?
Yeah.
From a societal standpoint, modern society, it's like, well, you're being mean. It's like, I mean, I thought I was being funny, but like I could see how you would think it was mean.
Yeah.
But it's actually just funny because at the end of the day, like I have to remain in touch with objective reality as a man.
100%.
So I can either carry the weight of that objective reality or I can carry the weight and have a smile and a jokiness to it as well.
Yeah. I mean, comedy is tragedy. Comedy is making light of tragedy or parodizing tragedy. So it's literally the way that we as humans actually process tragedy ever since forever. So in complete agreement to that. And, you know, the interesting thing that I've come to recognize in regards to, once again, like men being super direct and somewhat callous in their humor or just in the way they talk, like being an asshole, right? So I've been actually like, it came to me very clearly. It was like, you know, I have a female dog, which in antiquity, or not even antiquity, but just almost less than 100 years ago, female dogs were referred to as bitches. Like you look at a book, it's like, oh, this bitch, blah, 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 because that was the name for a female dog. And I've always had female dogs growing up. And female dogs can be bitchy. They can be nippy and just being like an asshole, like not even an asshole. They're just being like, whoa, why the fuck are you being nippy like that, right? With men are assholes, right? So when you're an asshole, what are you doing? You're being very direct and you're being very blunt, almost to the point where it's so callous and cold and direct that it's like, yo, what the fuck, dude? That hurts in that way. Why couldn't you soften it up? But that it's correlated to truth. And it's something that's just like, this is the way it is, right? You're stating a objective truth about reality in a very direct manner that sometimes doesn't land softly. Whereas in a space of a bitchy way of doing something, it's often passive aggressive. So the interesting thing that I found out, like when I actually rationalized that, once again, bringing it back to men, right? And this is something that I just had happen last week where I was like, did this motherfucker just talk to me this way? Because I'm a fun, happy going guy, blah, blah, unless someone breaks the line within just being civil and respectful, right? And so point being, men talk to men a specific way because if you pass a certain threshold of how you talk, it's like, okay, there's an absolute threat of physical altercation. That's just where it goes, right? And a man being an asshole is like, yo, why are you being an asshole, bro? But it's also like understood. It's like, wow, this dude's super fucking blunt. He's super direct. He's being an asshole. Okay, fine. Very different than someone being passive aggressive. This dude, I was at the parking lot. I came down respectful. I'm like, hey, bro, you know, there's a lot of families here, blah, blah. Parking garage, cars are up to the 3rd level. I'm like, hey, bro, this parking thing's usually broken half the time and I pay every month for parking. I don't complain. But, yo, people got places to go. This is going to be like a 40-minute wait to get out of this parking structure at the gym. Could you lift the gate up so that, you know, people could go so that we can just like efficiency? You know what I mean? He's like, if you want to pay for everyone's ticket, you know, you can pay for everyone's ticket, but this is just how it goes. Like, you know, just like any parking garage, like with an attitude like that. And he went to the same college as me. He had, you know, and I was like, yo, I explained to him again. I'm like, wow, that was a really fucking bitchy way of fucking saying the shit. But like, let me say again, hey, bro, I know, but you know, for the sake of traffic, like people got places to be, like it's usually open. Can you do that? And he said it again with even more attitude. And I got pissed. And I was like, all right, you want to be a motherfucker about this? Fine. I left because it's not worth it, right? As a man to get an altercation like that. But the thing that I recognize is that people who speak in those ways in passive aggression, and once again, correlating it to potentially like the feminine and or people who just withhold that archetype as a whole, oftentimes they're not met with the threat of physical altercation. Right?
They'll change up real quick the moment you step forward
you know
and you close that 9-foot gap.
Yeah.
When they're like, oh shit, he coming towards me. Yeah. Then they're going to be like, okay, let me talk to my manager.
Right? Because if you were wearing something dumb or whatever, it'd be like, yo, that jacket looks fucking dumb. Whatever. You'd be like, fuck you, dude. Right? But if I were to be like, oh, where'd you get that jacket from? Fucking... So I could
Ross or
I don't know.
TJ
Even that's a funny roast. I don't know. I can't even do that because I'm not it's more of like sarcastic humor. But if it was in the place of like me doing something that's just like, wait, what the fuck, bro?
It's covert aggression.
It's covert aggression. And the fact that it's not direct and just truthful, and it's more of just like I'm trying to prod you and poke you in a way that's somewhat like sneaky and or like run away. It's like, what the fuck? Come speak to me here, you know? And then it'll be like, all right, fine. And so I find that really interesting because it's that passive aggression that can only exist within the vacuum where an individual feels safe enough not to be met with that physical altercation.
It's really interesting because I work a lot with men and it's pretty clear, like, if I overstep your boundary, you're going to fuck me up. If you do the same, I'm going to fuck you up, right?
Or at least there's that threat.
That's the thing. So there's an immediate respect
component. So that it doesn't ever go there.
But then what are this is a good segue in a way. It's like,
women are aggressive as well. Most of the time women are like, well, we're not aggressive. Men need to stop being aggressive. And it's like, but when you learn the tactics of covert aggression and you're like very crystal clear on what those tactics are, this is like a Kevin Samuels thing. Rest in peace, bro. It's like,
man, Kevin Samuels.
Shame, insults, guilt, and the need to be right. So anytime I've like had any sort of transgression, like with my mom or my partner, it's always like this covert aggression. So typically the first thing is like shame. It's like, oh, well, you're this because you're mean or you're da-da-da-da-da. Like, so, and I'll be like, well, I don't respond to shame. So if you'd like to like communicate, then I'm open to your communication. But I immediately, as soon as I recognize shame, I go, oh, you're attempting to make me feel shame because I'm just doing me right now. And I don't feel as though I'm out of alignment. You're using shame as a means to coerce me into doing or seeing what you want me to see.
Yeah. Or the reflection of me is making you feel uncomfortable about your own choices.
Exactly.
That's often a big thing.
So then I'll be like, I don't respond to shame. And then typically she'll be like, oh, okay. Like he doesn't respond to shame. So now I have to communicate like directly in a way.
Exactly.
But not in a way.
Like I'm not going to meet you
that
there.
is going to yell at him because of the threat of physical violence when communicating directly.
Right.
And it's an unconscious, subconscious thing within the feminine. Right. And so neutralize shame, insults. It's like, you're not shit. You're not da 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 da.
Or
it's
hitting somewhere where it's like, yo, that's
below the belt.
Yeah, like that's territory that you don't go to because that's
small,
when like, you're right.
You know,
something like that.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, like this thing that you're doing isn't shit.
So much better than you.
Yeah.
Or,
or your profession or whatever it is. Anything.
Insults and then guilt. If you loved me, you would come with me. If you loved me, you would do this. If you loved me, you would do that. Guilt and then the need to be right. It's like we've already kind of discussed and we've gotten to a point where like probably say I was right, but we ended it and it was like, oh, I was right. But then you're like, you keep arguing because of this need to not feel less than me. So that like need to be right now leads to another segue into another argument, basically, and where we started here, but now we're all the way over here. Yeah. This is the one thing I tell myself, and if I tell other guys too, it's like, if you find yourself in a discussion where these things are happening and you start to get confused, then it's happening and you'll know it's happening.
Yeah, where you feel like you're in fucking crazy land.
As soon as you start getting confused, and it's like, maybe don't like escalate the situation, but be like, look, we need to take 5 minutes. We need to reset. And you go collect yourself and you think about what was just communicated and then you come back, because confusion through covert aggression is technically like emotional abuse, right? Or it can lead, if that is a typical pattern over and over again from a woman who's not conscious of her actions or her emotions and is continually projecting a state of unease or dis-ease, then
or victimhood.
Exactly. Then it's like, oh, okay, these tactics are really important to be aware of. And then I always respectfully respond. So I don't like be like, oh, you're being covertly aggressive. Now I'm going to be overtly aggressive. Yeah. No, I don't like do that.
Or to match in covert aggression.
I don't,
because that's always available too. And that's not a pathway.
I'm just like, yo, I don't respond to these things. If you'd like to talk, I'm totally here for you and I'm down to talk.
See, and let's just be clear though. You choosing to hold that line is having boundaries with yourself, which is you loving yourself. So it starts off there. Like most people don't even have not capacity, they all have the capacity. They have not cultivated the heightened awareness and ability to choose in the split second to respond appropriately, to say, you know what, this is more of a valuable choice for me to hold, and this is a boundary that I'm holding, a standard I'm holding for myself. I'm going to hold this here, and I'm going to hold it firmly, because me choosing to match this is just creating a swirl and a cesspool. And that's what I used to find myself going into.
Me as well.
You know?
Hold it no matter what. Yeah. That's the thing, is like, and that's the thing, if you're already in a relationship and you're attempting to implement these things, it's going to be very challenging to implement these things unless you're like sitting down and being like, look, this is where we're at. Yeah. We have to shift things around here. Yeah. Because when you communicate in this fashion, it spirals. Yeah. And if she can't receive that reorienting and follow your lead as the masculine protector and provider and all these different things, then it's going to end.
Yeah.
Inevitably it will end.
Yeah.
And so off rip, every new relationship that gets started, enter with these frameworks, enter with this awareness of like, oh, okay, I'm not going to respond to these things.
Yeah.
And like my girlfriend will be like, you're mean. And I'll be like, yeah, you already know that though.
Riz God.
And I'll do it in a way where it's like, and I'll do that too. I'll be like, that's why you love me so much. And then I'll use my tone as a means of like bringing on charm in a way, but never apologizing for being direct and honest.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. If my cup is shaking, I can never keep my composure.
100%
like you're describing.
true. 100% true. And so one of the things I wanted to note too is that this way of you holding the boundary, for one, it's very hard to instill if you've had a long-term relationship where it hasn't been that way. And two, if you instate the boundary and they do not receive that and they keep passing it and bypassing it, then it will eventually lead to getting into that cesspool, and you will eventually break down and matching that level, until you inevitably say enough is enough. And and that's why a lot of individuals who even come here because their wives, or come to Sacred Sons because their wives told them, a lot of them end up separating. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we'd love to have this happy story, like, oh, this happened and then my family was just perfect. But a lot of times these are relationships that were, brought together and unified through dysfunction and or just like a lower level of consciousness and growth. Mm-hmm. And then once we reach those certain levels of, ascent, in our growth and everything, like, it's like, oh, okay, well, now that we're here, we can't, like, we're trying to meet each other here in these spaces of having healthy boundaries and communication and so forth. And that's not what we've cultivated and built. And it's almost like we have to completely rip that away. Mm-hmm. And even coming back together, there's a really good chance that the colors will mix and create that again. Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating stuff. And it also shows us that, once again, that journey, who knows what the journey is going to be? You know what I mean? Like, we can try to have everything right. We can try to, dot our I's, cross our T's and all these things. And we find the perfect woman, or we have kids and we do all these things. It's like, oh, this is how it's going to be. Mm-hmm. We don't know. If
people are in a relationship where they're like, okay, like I'm in that relationship where like there is no boundaries, and we end up in these spaces, and the covert aggression flies and the overt aggression flies. And you're like, okay, well, we got to end this. Mm-hmm. And you have that awareness, and you're like, okay, we got to end this. Mm-hmm. My ask, or the invitation, would be, own the parts that you contributed to that are completely out of alignment.
Agreed.
And speak to them like with complete ownership and honesty, not like, let me just break up, but let me like own this because I got told in this podcast to do it like this. No, like, own your pieces in the relationship. Hey, I'm coming to you, and I know we've been going through a bunch of stuff, and I've been dealing with this, but not like, oh, I'm upset with you about this, and I'm upset with you about that. It's not about you going to them and telling them everything that's wrong with them and why you're about to break up with them, but communicating, and it not like, oh, I'm not happy with you. Like, that's the same thing. Like, communicate like, hey, I know I've been kind of itchy. I know I've been naggy, and I know I haven't felt good, and I don't know how to make that better within myself, and I haven't been able to figure that out while we're together and through our relationship and stuff. And I know you're not responsible for fixing me either, and changing me. And I'm just becoming more aware of not only like about the part in our relationship that I played to bring it to where it's at right now. Yeah, and invite them, if they can receive it, to kind of own those parts as well. Mm-hmm. And then potentially move. And that's the thing. If they're on the other end and they're not responsive, it could get messy.
Truth.
But the invitation is just to hold that accountability piece and be like, from this place, I think it'd be best if we like part ways. And I've loved you this whole time, and you'll always be in my heart. But it's not working. Yeah. And I know why it's not working. And a lot of that has to do with me. Yeah. And if you can approach it from that space, it'll help the person way more in navigating getting over it, because they'll see like, okay, so what parts did I play in this? Right. Oh, okay. I can speak to them now, or I can reflect on them later, but at least I'm like coming from a place of not being the victim and not being like decimated by it, because now I can understand some of the confusion that maybe like as men, like most likely it's like, oh, I'm confused as to why we got here. But in that moment, she'll own those pieces or he'll own those pieces.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I can see how we got here. So there's no confusion around how we got here and why it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's a potential recourse.
Yeah.
But maybe there's not.
Yeah.
But it'll also help both of you navigate that in a good way and dissolve and move forward now with the awareness of, in relationships, we take ownership.
Yeah.
Always using I statements, always doing what we know we got to do. And if we don't do it, hey, I've been messing up, da 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 da.
Yeah.
So that's an important piece. If you're in a relationship and you're like, this isn't working, start the conversation with the parts that you're owning, and don't just use it as a preface to start shaming them after you talk about the things that you're unhappy about within yourself.
Yeah.
I'm just not happy. I just feel this or that. It's like, I'm talking to you really meanly. I'm being really nasty to you. Like own the full scope of what it is that you're contributing to the relationship.
Yeah.
So then that way, you guys both start from grief.
Yeah.
There's no bypassing grief now. So then if you start from grief, then you can grow from there.
Yeah.
Because the soil will be mended, the composting of the relationship will happen, and things can move forward. And hopefully you guys can plant new relationships in the future with people that are more in harmony and more accountable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. I think for one, it's our duty to do so, because if we're talking about being purposeful, if we're talking about legacy, if we're talking about all these things and we're holding on to something, or we're literally tending soil that just is not in the specific conditions in order to thrive and be fruitful, we're not being accurate and precise, and we're doing something that's against our purpose to some extent, at least, if we allow for it to keep occurring when we know that it's not right. And whether it's a man or woman, because in either situation, or whether it's man, woman, whatever this case, right? Whatever it is, whoever's in the space of not owning their accountability more fully in the relationship is what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, one thing that I've recognized within my previous relationship, and what I had to just get the shit kicked out of me in order to recognize, is also that we can do our best with the means that we have in order to embody what boundaries look like, holding those boundaries, loving ourselves, doing the things that we need to do in order to show up for the relationship. And if we are providing the space for there to be a person, object, something to blame and or displace responsibility onto, and that is the self-sabotaging narrative of the partner, then no matter what we do, just our presence there will allow for them, like we literally stand in front of the mirror to themselves. And not to say that we are, but they, like it's like we're right there, and they come and put themselves in a space so that we're in front of the mirror. The mirror is always there. They could just go, oh, here's the mirror. Now I'm looking at it. But we are there. We didn't put ourselves there. They didn't put us there. They've just shifted the perspective so that we're in front of that. And so they're never able to see. And sometimes the only solution is to be like, okay, you know what? I have to get away from here so that I can love you by you being able to see what you're doing, because I'm literally in the way. And not only that, everything that I do, as much as I try, as much love as I give, in all the ways that I try to do the things to try to support, benefit, encourage all these things, hold healthy boundaries, teach all these things, lead, that's not the medicine you need. And sometimes for us, whether that relates to us in our own individual life with coworkers, bosses, whatever, school, whatever it is, or romantic partners, I feel like it's an important lesson to learn, and or just like a specific situation to consider, is that just because we have the answers and just because we can be a leader or teacher for others does not mean that the specific circumstances that we're in, that we're meant to be that for the other person. And sometimes it's literally us taking ourselves away from that equation so that they can then not have someone else to blame, or at least not blame us for it, and then have to actually You know, because and once again, that's where boundaries being a form of love, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if you're going to impede the growth and therefore the happiness of the individual, because if they're making you unhappy and no matter what you do, they're still making you unhappy and you're both unhappy, then what good are you doing? You know, you're bypassing your own purpose and building your own legacy towards the goodness of the world and being a creator, mm-hmm. and also just like running in a little hamster loop that's mm-hmm. going nowhere. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
It's an interesting, you touched on happiness a little bit on the end there, and I think it's really important that men make decisions that lead to their happiness, because a lot of women do, and that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And one thing I've been touching on as I've had different conversations with different women that are in my friend group and whatnot is the necessity to understand the importance of sacrifice in relationship. And so we were talking a little bit about exiting a relationship, but let's talk about staying in a relationship, right? So it's like, we both want to be happy. We want happiness, right? And most men will naturally sacrifice themselves to make the others happy most of the time. And then most women will sacrifice others to make themselves happy and not necessarily make sacrifices to support the others. And so one thing as I've had different conversations with different sisters I call friends, I've asked them like, so you want all these things, right? You want this, and that's what you want in a relationship because then you're going to be happy and that's great, awesome. What sacrifices are you willing to make to get there? And that's always something that men or women, regardless, ask yourself, what sacrifices am I willing to make to get the results that I want? Because happiness is this elusive thing that almost to each individual means something different, yet everybody's searching for the said same thing, right? So like my version is like creating models and systems that are in alignment with the infinite so that can sustainably provide value to the world. But that's not the same necessarily goal or aim of my beloved, my girlfriend. So I listen to her, and then through my direction and purpose, she supports me, and then I am able to bring online the resources necessary to bring forward her happiness as well. But I'm so blessed that she chose to support my happiness and direction first, knowing that it would come at one point because she inspires me to believe in myself.
Right.
And so that's the main thing I've been realizing is like priorities typically have to, like, that's why I said the like happy king, happy kingdom thing. It's not that women's happiness isn't important. It's that if he's happy, he'll succeed, or he will be happy by his success, by proxy of his success, hopefully, and thus can provide all of the things, the experiences, the family that will make you happy.
Yeah.
But if the priorities are flipped opposite, it typically doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been observing and kind of like witnessing and having different conversations, especially living in more of a smaller community on the islands.
Right.
Very common.
And I'd say I completely get the sentiment in the context of what you're saying with happy king and happy kingdom. And at the same time, I also feel like happiness can come in all these different forms. Oh, hold on, stretch. All these different forms, like you've said. And specifically when I think about like what the richness of the polarity of the feminine can do for the man. Yes, happiness, right? But also like the supported and the encouraged king. The one that has the safe space in the midst of the fire and the warring that exists within him trying to build his legacy. And when I say warring, I don't necessarily mean going to war, but truly, literally, at a sense, like warring with his mind, warring with all of the things that go on towards building all of that while also being like online, like, okay, I still got to show up for fam. I still got to be the protector. I still got to do all these things. Having that space to come to that is nurturing and healing and rejuvenating. And like literally, there's nothing better than receiving that from your feminine. So, yeah, when we say happy, that's what happiness I feel like would embody for me and most men. And yet I also feel like some people could take that out of context and be like, oh, well, a happy king could just be doing some shit that makes him happy and not necessarily giving back to his family or something like that. But I get what you're saying in regards to context. I just feel like happiness could be misconstrued.
There's a new thing that's coming through. It's like happiness is a journey in a way, right? So it's like, because of the whole like finitude of timing, right? So it's like, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna have another day, right? So it's like just me being able to walk the journey is happiness. But oftentimes people identify happiness as the end result or a specific outcome. But it's the relishing of the opportunity, the humility, the gratitude, the grace that is like the necessary components to walk a journey of happiness, right? So even if I don't reach the desired outcome, and my time is cut short tomorrow or the next day or the next day, I'm going to show up wherever I was in that experience, that near-death experience, and I'm going to know, dang, I did the thing. That was great.
Yeah.
I'm like ecstatic. Even though like, oh, I didn't build this or that. I'm not going to like think that. I'm going to be like, well, I was already happy.
Right.
So really walking the journey with people that you love, with people that I love.
Yeah.
And with a purpose that adds continual value, or at least you've planted the seeds of purpose that add the continual value.
Totally. Yeah.
That really leads to the happiness that most of us are really calling in and desiring. So falling in love with the journey instead of the like desired result is typically how like stability tends to form.
Yeah.
And then people don't get caught up in an erotic loop of searching for validation and purpose outside of self.
An erotic loop.
Erotic or neurotic?
Oh, what did you say?
I said neurotic.
Oh, neurotic. Okay, I was like, an erotic loop. What? I've never heard someone contextualize that word that way. Yeah, that makes more sense. I was thinking when you were saying that, it's like a grateful king, thriving kingdom, or something like that. But anyways, I'm just getting into semantics. Yeah. But one thing I wanted to touch on too is like when we talk about like humility, that's something that really gets kind of like psyoped or worded within society and the conscious community as well. It's like, having humility, but like I feel like having humility is only possible when we're attached to that grief. And if we're attached to that grief, we can be attached to gratitude. And from that, we also align and potentially uncover our purpose. And then through walking in our purpose, we're actually able to be humble. Whereas once again, there's that like thinness when it comes to gratitude and or humility, where it's like, I'm being humble, like I'm not thinking I'm better than people. Sure, that's a level of humility, but humility would also be understanding that you're going to walk this path and it might be very lonely and it might be very challenging. And maybe the only people who know the struggles that you're going through are a select few or just you. I feel like that's humility and really walking that path of purpose.
Humility is often in modern times like synonymous with like weakness in a way. Like be humble. Like don't be proud of yourself for the fact that you just did that. Be humble. And it's like actually like, well, can I stay connected to my grief while being in joy?
Right. Exactly.
Right? Or can I be in grief while still seeing the sun outside and knowing that it's going to keep shining and that light's going to keep coming in even when it's dark in here? That's like humility. That's what it means to be human in a way, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so and then like humor comes through as well. Right. It's the opposite polarity in a way that keeps us connected to the humanity within us. Yeah. So it's really interesting to kind of track happiness and how it is supported by grief. Yeah. And then humility is this like lever point in the middle. And so, definitely really curious about how it's going to pan out in the next few. I'm just like a people person, so I'm like, man, if people can grasp this, it'll be really amazing. If a few grasp this, it'll be great. It's
on the horizon. I mean, the fact that this is happening, it's on the horizon. It's all working out in perfect time. And one interesting thing I have to point out, because I was talking to my buddy yesterday in regards to AI and all this stuff. And I have to be completely honest with everybody. If it was not for the efficiency of AI, this probably wouldn't be happening to the level that it is. because using AI, I'm able to like very easily, I still have to put my hand in it, but I'm very easily edit these pods. And I'm also very easily able to cut up little shorts and reels, which is the way that people are receiving and digesting content right now. Mm-hmm. And one of my buddies was like, well, don't you think that's going to like, take away humans and really quickly and stuff like that? And I'm like, no, because there's not one person that I can trust to go and be like, okay, here's the footage, edit all of it, now post and plan it, cut up these reels, do that, create we don't have that like universal brain yet. And even when we do, there will need to be an oversight and supervisory potential over it from humans and a human touch to it. So in either case, I find it really interesting because one of the things that I've talked about on the very first podcast, which was just me talking, is that there's a lot to be potentially afraid of, not that we have to be afraid of. And one of those things is like very rapidly advancing technology and AI. And yet we are the ones creating it. And so we don't have anything to be afraid of if you and I and other brothers and sisters like us who are feeling called and have been walking this path towards being on the ascent to being the leaders of this like new and evolving world in regards to bringing us up to a level of just purely like responsibility of choice and sovereignty and awareness. As long as we keep that going and start to build and expand on it, like what we're doing here, I feel that that's that's how it happens.
Yep.
That's how not everything burns down and we're not Terminator.
Well, as long as people that are living at the edge, right, those people are going to be in touch with pain and grief, right. So they're at the edge, and then it's like here we have this new tool and component, and now the humility to navigate that space with that tool, right? And not everybody has that, And so I understand the like complexity of potential danger as a result of it coming online.
Totally, yeah.
But also as someone who lives life at the edge, the ability to streamline all of these different vectors that can now amplify the ability to lead others and impact others and influence others. That's what matters.
Agreed.
Right? Because then we get people on that journey of happiness or that journey of finding themselves or walking up the mountain. And so every tool can be utilized effectively. The typical way human consciousness distorts the use of a tool is by being out of touch with pain and grief and suffering.
Yeah. I love that you're saying this because this is something that I've been touching on every single time, which is this correlation with grief and gratitude. Like the complete intertwining. What I've said is that in order to access the deep well of gratitude, which leads to humility, is through grief. Like that is the only way for us to access. Otherwise, we just skim the surface and we think we're tapping into gratitude, but it's so much deeper than that. And like you said, it's just different words for the same thing. Tapping into pain, tapping into grief. It's words for a very similar thing. Because when you're talking about pain, you're talking about pain of grief. We're talking about all of that lends itself to humility, right? Like just like we said earlier, these people who are having to, literally butcher their own food, right? And living in different countries and so forth. They're not entirely like, oh, I'm so grateful for this chicken, thank you, all the time. And yet they're also attached to the mortality of things to a way, and they're also attached to their grief in a way that when they are feeling a certain way and so forth, like they're able to access that, right? And I'm not saying that all these people are perfect and they have all the codes. And there's obviously a very huge disparity between the ability to connect and tap into that richness of gratitude for each other and connection that us on the Western world have, I don't know if we want to say forgotten, but have lost engagement with, right? But it's always there. And I feel like our mission is truly to start to realign and reframe a lot of what's being generated within media and society and so forth as valuable, and starting to just be like, actually right here, just this right here, just these little touch points that just like speak to the heart, and it's just like plink, I felt that. Wait, okay, so I can think differently than all of society. Wait, no, then I'd be an awesome. And then another piece of content comes in, doink at the heart. Oh wait, hold on. Oh wow, okay, this is real, and that's how the change is affected. So
I thought it was really interesting how you touched on how not everybody feels grief or gratitude in specific instances. And if you want to feel authentic gratitude, you also have to embrace true grief.
Yeah.
Right. And so the edge of one's capacity is typically where we find that gratitude, right? So we look at like David Goggins and how he's like in 90-degree weather, like just trucking for 20 miles, right? What he's doing is he's staying at the edge of his capacity, right? So he's choosing suffering, pain. He's choosing pain.
Yeah.
But then when he gets to the end, he has his meal or he has his shake or whatever he has, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Yes. Right. And that's what it means to be alive as a human being. It's like to have true gratitude, it just emanates from the full scope of the experience.
Yeah.
It's not something that like I can affirm every day, but it is something like I can acknowledge and I can pray.
Yeah.
Maybe like, thank you, Creator, da 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 da. But there's nothing like experiencing me pushing the limits of my physical capacity or my mental capacity or my emotional capacity or whatever it is, and then thriving and then being like, I got that job. We're going to dinner tonight at that one place that I've been wanting to go to, but we haven't been able to afford. Let's go. This is awesome. Oh my gosh, this is the best steak of my life because I earned it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's why gratitude comes online, is because we earn it.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of peeps are sitting there like, oh, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful. But true gratitude is earned by embracing grief and pain.
Yeah.
Pushing the limits of one's capacity.
Yeah.
Meeting the intensity. So then that way Creator's like, okay.
Yeah.
They get it right there.
Right.
Cool. So now that he's increased his capacity, I can give him more.
Yeah.
Right. So he's training his capacity and sensitivity over time, because to be at the edge, you have to be sensitive and acute to like what's happening around you.
Yep.
Because you could pop off, or you could do this, or you could fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
So Creator is constantly inviting us to live life at the edge. God's inviting us to live life at the edge, because if we live there, God will be like, capacity is going up.
Yeah.
Give him more.
Yeah.
Give him more authority, but also with that authority comes more responsibility.
Right.
Give him more power, but then also the moment he receives that, he's going to feel like, oh shoot, if I fumble this, people are going to lose their livelihoods and their ability to feed their families. So even though I'm the boss, I also am holding children's futures in my hand.
Yeah.
And so to know that is ultimate true embodiment, right? And that's what God is inviting us to step into. Creator's inviting us to step into that. Live life at the edge, and everyone around us will thrive. Not everybody has to live there, but everybody has to be making progress towards meeting their present limitations to be worthy of receiving the blessings from the people that are living full on at the edge, leaning into the wind with their chin over the ocean, basically. And I'm just embracing like, okay, the wind's going to hold me. And I know just the right amount of pressure, right amount of trust, the right amount of calculation and risk to take to be able to hold this infinite capacity that continues to expand. And so we have great examples of that nowadays.
Yeah, we do.
With some of these people modeling on media and social media. And that, for me personally, that was what I did. I pushed myself and broke those limits because it was the only thing that made me feel alive, because I was in so much pain. So it helped me access my pain. I would tell myself, can't stop, won't stop till I reach the top. Don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life a champion. Every single time I wanted to give up, that's all I tell myself over and over again. And because I've decided victory is already written in fate, because I've already decided that I'm not going to stop, and I have the fuel of my pain and my grief to carry me forward into the future. So I will not give up. And because I will not give up, it's inevitable. My victory is already won. I don't have to doubt myself anymore, because time is relative to your perception of space. If I believe it, it will be, if I do the consistent daily discipline necessary to get to where I want to be, period.
Yeah. And if you choose to show up in those moments where you could, where society would assume and or agree with you to fall back on your laurels and your morals and ethics and go into victimhood, like that's always there. And I feel like the difference is that It's not only you knowing it, but it's in those times where you do find the challenge. There's times when things don't go right that you don't choose to go back to once again, going away from the edge and going to the safe space and oh, well, there's a reason for me to give up now because it's not going all perfect or whatever. And this is what the rest of society does. This is what everyone else does. And it's choosing in that moment to say, no, this is my boundary. This is what I'm holding. And when you say at the edge too, like for some people, that's like just getting uncomfortable. For some people, that's just really taking care of themselves, you know, like just like we talked about on another one of these pods. It's like for some people, just eating better. For some people, just like working out is like monumental because it all leads somewhere, right? Like the mountain doesn't end. And so just us getting to those specific levels, and it can start off so small, but just always increasing. And it's funny because it's not even increasing our capacity because the capacity just is always there. And yet it's just us more like solidifying. It's almost like passing through these steel gates.
It's becoming real.
Yeah, and once you pass them, it's just like, oh, okay. Once again, like you can't. Being asleep and being awake isn't a good analogy because we sleep and are awake every day and night. But it's really truly like knowing that fire's hot. You know what I mean? It's just like, oop, okay, know that fire's hot. I'm never gonna forget that again. And every single door, it's just like a firm knowingness, and also like it's like, oh, I can't go back there now. Right? There's no reason for me to go back there. And then it's not that the capacity isn't there, but it's just that like we've passed a certain threshold, right? And I completely agree that I do believe that that's a consistent ascent, and that's a consistent as long as we are there and choosing to hold that and once again choosing that space of sovereignty where we're choosing in every moment like this is what I'm doing. And in the midst of all of the tragedy, because there will be tragedy, we will be victims of circumstance, but we don't have to be caught up in the archetype or perspective of victimhood. And in the midst of that, we can choose to rise above adversity and, you know.
And if people have the courage to walk one step out of their comfort zone, the moment you do, don't look at the guy who's further ahead and be like, oh, I'm supposed to be there. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So then that's the thing about deciding, right? So time it's like, what is time really? So if I decide I'm going to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, once every month, right? And it's going to be this steady progress. 10 years, you've outpaced the people that were trying to run sprints like 7 steps forward and 10 steps back because they're gassed out from doing all of this spiritual growth stuff or whatever, right? And we've seen so many people burn out in that fashion.
Yep.
And so it's always a marathon, never a sprint. And if you're really eager and you're really like pushing, that's because you're not looking at your grief. Like I don't trust eager people when we're on weekends and and we have guys on our teams.
So true.
We're leading teams and we have our coworkers with us and they're really eager to get in there and show us what they can do because they're a leader too. I don't trust those people.
Yeah.
I don't trust them because they're not calm. They don't even trust themselves.
Agreed.
And that's the main thing is like...
They're looking for that validation of worth and all these things.
And that's okay to look for that. But why don't you just like take a moment and relax and focus on bridge 2, the thing that you're good at, and bring that through for us so that I can see you at bridge 2. Yeah. And then once I see you, now I can keep slotting you there. Your confidence will grow. Right. You do that thing for us. I know I know you're going to run this route. you're going to hit you with a pass. You're good. Yeah. Perfect. But if you're like looking to go from 2 to 3 really quickly, bridge 2 to 3, and you're on your way up the mountain, it's like the people already at 3 are like, start to look at you like, yo, what are you doing? Yeah. Because it took us so much discipline and focus and consistency to get here. And even though we may make it look effortless to a degree, it's because I spent years studying people too. So if you don't have the ability to look and listen, then you're not going to become that embodied leader. So the invitation is, as people grow, there's no rush. Be focused on the process. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Give yourself grace while at the same time holding yourself to accountable to a higher standard. Walk this tightrope. And from there, you will outlast most people around you. And if you outlast them, you will find yourself in a new class at one point where you're surrounded by the people that outlasted everybody else around them. And that's how you become a true leader. True leaders are forged through consistency, discipline, focus, and the willingness to be gracious with themselves and be gentle with themselves and have an element of tenderness as well, to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we don't know what's going to happen, but there's enough of us now to know that good things, great things will happen from what's been planted here.
Yeah.
And I have full faith in that, because for me personally, they've always given me life expectancy numbers, and I'm just like, this is so annoying, because I'm like, I'm killing it. I'm doing the thing, and I have to also grapple with my own mortality.
Yeah.
And the invitation is for people to embrace the journey. So then that way, when they inevitably have to grapple with their mortality, as I do, there's no regrets. And it's like, well, I already did it, so maybe I could just finish up real quick. Yeah. And then Creator could take me home. I'm down with that.
Yeah. 100%. And two things I want to touch on, which is tenderness, and then also like being able to leave here clean, being able to leave here, gratefully and in a space where we feel good about everything. Me and my coach will both talk about like the fact that like what hell would be for us is to die and then not do the things that for me back in the day, it was my album, right? I was like, as long as I put this out, I'm good. Now there's more. And it's really building the legacy on top of everything that I've done. And I think that a version of hell would be to have to meet the individual that you could be. I've heard someone else talk about this too, but it's been, like imagine you're just like, oh my God.
That's
you have
like
to shake their hand. They're just all chiseled and like epic. And
what if God is the version of you that you could have been?
Well, they are, because it's all intertwined.
Just posing it as a question for that.
So true. And so I mean, I think that, and when you talk about having to face your own mortality all the time, I think that that's a blessing. Once again, it's we either see everything as a blessing and a curse, right? And the funny thing is that's available to all of us. Like if we you're a biohacker, you do ozone therapy for people and so forth, and you're also a very healthy, clean eater. By the way, I never talked about it, but like we've led men's work events together. Like it's been great. Point being, that's always online for everybody. And so if we're talking about doing men's work, or we're talking about doing biohacking or whatever it is, right? That's stuff that's always available to us. So we do it in regards to maintenance and or to keep ourselves mentally, emotionally healthy, all these things, right? For the people who succeed, they have to believe in themselves to a capacity that no one else ever will. That's just it. Except for maybe your coach, which I'm very supportive of people having a coach for the uses of accountability, clarity, blind spots, all these things, right? Refinement. But if we're talking about what makes sense and what's purposeful and what can actually get us somewhere, like us actually confronting our own mortality and, being grateful for just waking up in the morning and taking a breath. One of my other clients was saying that. I'm like, I completely agree. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, holy shit, I'm here, right? Because if we keep ourselves there, then at least we can start without losing sight, right? Sometimes my automatic thing is like, I get up on the phone, I see what time it is, I'm like, oh, and I'm like, autopilot, I go to YouTube or something, and I'm like, oh, what the fuck am I doing? I close it right away. I'm like, what was I doing? Now I do Duolingo in the morning, wake my brain up, and because I'm trying to learn my native language. Point being, all of these things are always available, and yet we don't do them. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about burnout and people being too eager. I'm always super eager. I'm always super intense and super passionate, and that's something that I'm learning as well. Like I told you about earlier, I'm doing a lot. I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I lift heavy. I dance on the weekends. I do personal training. I do this stuff, have my own stuff and family. And for me, it's easy for me to push through pain. Some people, it's very hard to push through pain, which is why I'm their personal trainer. But for me, it's very easy. It almost feels like I'm supposed to, or it's like the comfortable thing, or it's like the normal thing for me to push through pain, because I do it so much with everything else that I do. That choosing to be tender and choosing to be responsible with myself and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe tomorrow isn't assured, but in order for us to do the things that we need to do, you actually need to be tender with yourself today, which is what I did yesterday, right? I was just like, all right, I need to rest and recuperate a little bit. And, you know, in some of those times, I'm like, well, I just want to go hard. I want to go hard. There's a method to the madness. There's a certain level of being able to ebb and flow and have the dynamism, you know, of life. And yeah, if we do not have those spaces of being, and sometimes for some of us, it's going to be consciously being tender. For some of us, it's going to be consciously getting intense, you know, and doing the intense workout. For me, it's the opposite. So yeah, it's interesting to be on the precipice of that growth, because for so much of humanity, it's like, you know, do the thing. Like, that's the funny thing about the David Goggins stuff, is that David Goggins is super impressive and his shit does not work for me because I push too hard and I burn out and I get sick or I get injured. For me, it's not about pushing. He's perfect for the people who just need to fucking get their ass in gear and do something. Yeah. For the people who do too much, not the right dude, you know? But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because there's, you know, and there's polarities of all people. There's the whole spectrum, and everyone has their growth edge. Everyone has their specific things to triumph and challenges to overcome. But yeah.
If you're eager and you've been doing it for a long time though, like you've been consistently like 2 steps forward, 1 back, and you're eager, you're still not running like 10, you're not running like a 10-7, you're running a 2-1, you know, like, so that's important to be aware of, right? Like,
true.
Because that 1 back is actually a rest, right? Typically. Sometimes it's retracking back to a bad habit. Yeah. But typically that's a rest point because we're either moving forward or back. Yeah. Right. And so typically I'll gauge how stable someone's eagerness is based on how long they've been walking the pathway forward. So like I have a significant capacity as well, right? It's like people that have been consistently doing this, they have an increased capacity. So like I'm in the gym at 6, I'm doing coffee enema at 4:30 a.m. I'm in the gym by 6 a.m. I'm out of the gym by 8 a.m. I have my smoothie at 8:30, and then I'm prepped for work. And that work typically that day will either be a client with Ozone therapy or property management work, business work as well. Right. And then I'm working basically all the way through till 2 to 3 in the afternoon. And then I'm decompressing and I'm in bed by 8:30, 9 p.m. so that I can run it back again and continually create the sustainable crushing it. Right. Right. And so that's the main thing is like, if you have a tendency to like burn out, the invitation is to create sustainability long-term. So like I'm taking magnesium to rest. I'm like doing all of
glycinate.
I'm doing all of these things for recovery just as much as I'm doing all of these other things to amplify and push my body and increase my mental capacity and emotional capacity as well. Yeah. So it's multifaceted, right? And that's that third bridge on the mountain. It's like, oh, because I now have a really good physical protocol, my mental and emotional stays way more stable so I can work longer and thus be more productive because now my body is operating at an increased capacity. So that's what's really interesting about the like spiritual personal development journey is when you get to the third bridge, some people might be like, oh, that doesn't resonate for me. I'm good. I don't need to do that. I'm already this or whatever. Yeah. But those people don't have that same level of discipline and consistency necessary. They just think, oh, whatever, it's okay. And those people will get outclassed and outpaced every single time. And some people might be like, well, it's not a competition, Kai. Everything has a hierarchy to it. And to have a significant impact, one has to be worthy of distinction and be significant. Agreed. Not just believe it and tell themselves or affirm it or whatever, but actually have the consistent actions and proof of work necessary so that creators like, cool, we're going to throw him an opportunity that's going to push him even harder, but watch the outcome that's about to happen from this. You didn't see this coming, kid. Here we go.
And these are the stories that we live for. These are the stories, these are the fables that have been told since the dawn of time. These are the movies that we create, these fantasies, but we can bring them into reality, right? Through our actions and really, really enrich what humanity as to what we know it of right now is and can be, right? Because we're always dealing with the limits and thresholds of our past. And unless we choose to not be defined by them or, restricted by them, that's the only way that we can surpass them, right? And to believe that we can do more or be more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the past 100 years, we've become super, super arrogant, right? I mean, within the last 100 years, we had, we were giving kids radium and morphine and all these things and killing them. People's jaws were falling off because of radiation poisoning and all this stuff. And yet here we are like less than 100 years later, and we're thinking that we know everything within medicine, right? Mm-hmm. And so this arrogance of where we're at right now can also be that limiting factor of what we're able to push forward with. So it's not just us believing more, but it's also us being able to reframe like, hey, we have come very far. And like in about 5 to 10 years, we're probably going to realize that we were dumb and we didn't know what we're doing. Just like in the 90s, literally you and I grew up in the 90s during the seed oil, like basically or it was even a little bit before that. I guess it was from like the 70s to the 90s, but like the bastardization of saturated fats, the glorification of sugar, the glorification of seed oils, like all of the processed foods, all of this was just like a manufactured mass hysteria that now we're finally able to see, oh, actually we had it all wrong. And it's still a mass perception that we're having to break down, because it's like that's what we grew up knowing, and yet we're withheld within this this mind trap of what we thought was the thing, and we thought that was always going to be the thing. And so it's also that space of us being able to be humble and flexible and being like, hey, this is what we know now. Let's not be so arrogant and facetious to people who are being open-minded, because undoubtedly within 5 to 10 years, we will probably rectify a lot of mistakes that are occurring right now in groundbreaking times,
Everything is going to continually progress.
Yeah.
And that's why happiness is a journey, not a destination. Right. And so it's like, if I'm like, I reached the point where I've succeeded now, I'm happy. Or I claim to be happy, but then I'm not actually continually progressing from that threshold of achievement, then eventually I won't be happy, but I'll have to lie to myself that I am happy because I have the thing that I said would always make me happy. And thus I either bypass or project that unhappiness onto those around me. And then from that point, I wonder, well, I'm happy, but now I'm alone. Or I'm happy, but my kids hate me. Or I'm happy, but I can't get anybody to call me back, Jeez. And that's really where people are kind of navigating from, is happiness really being a journey and not an end outcome.
Agreed. Just like, how we touched on earlier, like that, the tragedy and then the actual thing that ends up being the thing that makes it worth it is only something we can see after it's done. So why be miserable during that whole period, when we can be in gratitude or happy about it? I'm in complete agreement to that. Is there something you want to specifically touch on in regards to where you're at, or in regards to the world, and that we haven't already touched on right now that we haven't?
I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but the importance of exploring the infinite model and the infinite game, right? So I'm sure there's like entrepreneurs, people into like creating stuff, and they're looking at like, okay, if I do this, then I can do this, then I can do this. But then if that model dies with you, or if that model, if America were to not exist, would die, right? If the state were to fall and it dies, it dies. But if we're working in an infinite model focused on commodities and regenerative agriculture or some of these really important components.
Can you explain what that means? Because even I don't fully understand what I get a tinge of it, but people will definitely not probably understand.
So I'm not an expert, but I've been working with this nonprofit called Living Myths out on Maui. And basically what they've been doing is integrating the Native Hawaiian cultural practices with the more modern techniques of agroforestry that have been kind of brought together in some of these places like Brazil and Hawaii and some of these more tropical areas that have a lot more biodiversity.
Got you. Okay.
And then taking those plants and developing systems where the first stage we're growing this, and then we're co-planting with these components here to boost the production of that.
Gotcha.
And then
like
once
you were
that,
saying earlier.
And then once that produces,
Right.
we cut that down and then we add in the next story. And
Yeah.
so the invitation is to look at how can we regenerate commodities long term, because that's where all of the resources are going to be in the future. No matter how technologically advanced we get, we're still going to have to eat.
I see what you're saying.
And
Yeah.
if we look at like
regenerating our soils and so forth.
and if we look at like how
Yeah.
native cultures have been really taken advantage of and abused,
Yeah.
that is the way to reclaim
Yeah.
sovereignty
Yeah.
from a native space. Is like you can play their game if you want, get
Yeah.
their degrees, do their things, start your businesses in their ecosystems. But there's also an opportunity for natives with land and people that have the water on the land to implement strategies and techniques that actually produce value long term. That land increases in value time over time over time. Then you have the resources. Then you can even get into production, right? Of like, okay, we're going to make oils. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Then we can take that, sell that bulk, or even build brands off of that where we have our own hair oil or we have our own macadamia chocolate bars or like whatever it looks like. And then now we're moving that to scale.
So you're still talking in the vein of capitalism.
I'm still talking in the vein of capitalism, but capitalism is technically infinite when it functions in harmony with nature.
Truth.
Yeah.
Because, okay, this is I'm glad that we landed on this topic because we're both individuals who are in the real estate investing space and just in the business space as a whole. And that's a really big thing within the conscious community and kind of like the psyop of not just the conscious community, it's everyone, you know, especially in the United States, which is a nation built upon entrepreneurship and yet based on industrial revolution, like basically creating like the factory schools and everything like that. And albeit being in like our parents' generation and before that's time, being able to work like a regular, you know, occupation and be able to afford a home. Obviously, that not being the way it is now. And yet you have individuals who are graduating with degrees and tons of debt who have like no potential positive outcome unless they go back to school or get into a trade or something like that, or be an entrepreneur or do some stupid shit like OnlyFans, right? All that to be said, like capitalism as a whole, if built upon creation, if built upon one, you know, instituting upon themselves to be a creator, an entrepreneur, someone providing value and creating something new and competing within that space, in the realms of healthy competition, not only creates a healthy economy, but also drives progress. And that's something that so much of the conscious community and also everyone doesn't understand, but specifically the conscious community that should be more level-headed and is like, oh, let's do it differently. It's like, no, if you actually just stop fucking being an employee and actually create something new and take a risk and learn the things, not only will you find that a lot of these individuals who become successful CEOs and entrepreneurs and so forth, they have worked way harder than everyone and they're providing value. They're providing not only jobs, but they're providing something that would have never existed otherwise. Instead of someone just helping to fulfill someone else's vision as a little worker bee and being like, well, how come they have so much money? Because they took the risk. They saw it through. They fucking, you know, were maybe impoverished for a certain amount of time so that they could give all their revenue towards growing it. It's literally, I've been creating this little small handbook about cultivation and how growing crops. So you and Kyle probably like it because of the nonprofit you're in, but it's how cultivating crops is completely analogous in every way to achieving like a goal or building something, right? It's literally like a baby and all the things, whether it's like irrigating the soil and aerating it, like creating space for it, creating boundaries for it, fertilizing the soil with knowledge, all these things growing, and then also to tend to it and how there are specific like pests, for instance, right? There are like actual big giant pests, which could be like family, like squirrels, birds, stuff like that. And then there are also the very insidious small pests that if you don't look closely, might not be there, which are the mental, right? The self-limiting beliefs, like the thoughts from other people who come in and weasel their way in, and then all of a sudden it infests the whole thing. The whole crop is dead, right? So yeah, point being, like, these individuals are complaining about people who have chosen to carefully cultivate and grow their crop, and it's not just I'm growing corn. Everyone's growing corn. No, it's a new color. It's a new crop. It's a new thing that hasn't existed yet, and not all of them will succeed. But it through that growing of all these different crops, it's like, oh, this is the one, and then society pushes forward. And what's really interesting about the economy as a whole and capitalism, I just want to say this because this space doesn't come up with everyone. Competition in capitalism actually, by default, through demand and through increasing supply, makes things cheaper. And for some reason, people don't understand this. Like, people think, like, I don't know, people are just, once again, so ungrateful. Like, everyone has a fucking iPhone. It's like $1,000 or whatever. The only reason why it's $1,000 and not like fucking 15,000 is because everyone wants one. Like, all this technology is only cheap because everyone wants it, and because certain individual companies have ascended to that space. And that doesn't mean that we can't do capitalism better, and we can't refine that, and we can't align it. But the only reason why we're able to live the luxurious life that we have, and let's be real, it's a fucking luxurious life, is because of the fact that capitalism works. And it can be done so much better. I think we can all agree on that. Like, there's corruption. Like, we could easily create cellulose for plastics right now. Instead, there's a fucking whole hold on, petroleum, which causes us to use it for all our plastics. But we can switch to compostable plastics very easily. It's just we need to create demand. And the only way that we create demand for things is by us having consensus about it. So when people are like, oh, blah, 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 okay, great. And that's another thing. Being the altruistic, hippie, revolutionary, whatever, and not being relational and not being regulated in your emotions does not bode well for the other individual who's worried about being a CEO or focus on other things, and they find no relation to you. In order to speak to that person's heart, for one, regulate your fucking emotions. Two, like, show up better so that we can start to congeal and unify in thought and be able to communicate appropriately. Because I think that's what we're experiencing right now big time, is that people are, I think it's, honestly, I think it's very, very genius. I choose to believe that everything is, blessing for purpose, right? So I used to think, oh, it's insidious and these people controlling the world and blah, blah, blah. And to a certain level, it is what you'd say evil and or malicious. But how can the maliciousness or whatever, the destruction, actually bring about the positive change? And I think that the way that this has been done, which is like this way of making people take away their own rights, feel empowered, being completely immature and irresponsible and all this stuff, is making us have to look at that so that we can then refine ourselves, When
you look at the big picture, you see how everything is ultimately going to end up better.
Right. Yeah.
Like, even though it's like, yeah, we're using plastic, yeah, we're using oil, like all of these different things are happening. You're right. Like, there's one thing Kale said. It's like, well, he always says it in Lodge, but it's like, you don't have to be anybody. You just have to participate. Right. And so, like, part of being human is inviting participation in. So how can we participate in what's happening here? Because if I reject this, then I have no influence in it changing because I have no resources to actually shift it.
Right.
And so the finite model technically is part of the infinite.
Right.
And it could be a phase within the infinite, and it could transition into something even better than what it is right now.
Yeah.
But if we disown it or bastardize it, then we lack influence within it.
Agreed.
And that's something my father would always say as we would have these debates or discussions about stuff, is like, oh, the people, they're doing this, they're doing that, and da-da-da. He's like, well, you got to be inside to change it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be inside. I'm a rebel, and da-da-da. And it's like, cool, well, I don't necessarily want to go work for a corporation, but I am down to be a business operator. I am down to be a creative producer. I am down to put my time, energy, attention, and resources behind things that are sustainable long-term.
Yeah.
And that is another form of participation. Participation doesn't look
Absolutely.
like you working for a big corp. It could look like you buying that plot of land and doing everything in your power to make it sustainable long-term for you. And then that system now is still in participation with the greater system, even though you may view it as separate.
Yeah.
It's still a microcosm of that, what that other greater system could be. And that's kind of what we're looking to do in general. And that's what I've been kind of learning with these syntropy models in agriculture is like, oh, this infinite model can be implemented long term, but people have to step up. And it's typically the people with good hearts, pure hearts, because you can't teach that. But the problem is the pure-hearted people are too afraid of their grief and too afraid of the negativity to face that. But if they can face it, then on the other side of that, at the second bridge, lies the opportunity to build something sustainable long-term that you guys can actually like take and pass on to your children. So even if you like stop at the second bridge in your personal growth and development, you have your own business, your family life is stable, you love your kids so much, your kids love you, like that's enough. That's more than enough. Like there's a reason why self-deletion rates are so high amongst men. It's because we're not even getting that. Right? And that's because most men are like, well, I spent all my money on this degree and I'm not happy, or I spent all my time, energy, and attention on this woman or this degree or these things and I'm still not happy. And the moment they wake up and realize like, oh, okay, I can work for myself. There's some risk there. But nowadays, there's way more risk getting $100,000 worth of debt to get a piece of paper to go and try and hustle at corporations
100%.
to get paid $50K a year or whatever it is. So that's kind of like where we're at as a society. And we'll start to see the continual shift towards that because I believe in the goodness of people. I truly, if you want to be like, oh, I'm positive, believe in the goodness of men, believe in the goodness of women, believe in the goodness of children. That's like, let's not worry about capitalism when there's so many bad things happening to children. Our responsibility is to protect the goodness of children. And if my state or country is not going to do that, then I'm going to become as sovereign as I can so that my voice can be as loud as I want it to be, because you can't control my income or my status or my impact anymore. That's the goal. Be someone who squeaks, but people actually have to freaking listen to you because you actually control most of the production for this area or whatever. So production-based economies is where we want to go and get away from get back to production-based economies, away from service-based economies. So if you're like, oh, I have this piece of paper, but it's not working out, look at how you can leverage your skills right now, get some assets, start creating value on those pieces of property, not just like tiny homes and Airbnbs and stuff, but like sustainable infrastructures and models, because plants grow everywhere other than like maybe the Arctic. So how can you model your creation after creator's creation? That's how we truly liberate our world. It's not going to come from us wishing it away and doing a bunch of mantras. It's going to come from us building sustainable...
Manifesting.
Exactly. Manifest. It's like build sustainable infrastructure. Do the things necessary to get to where we want to be. Because at this point, we require allies. I might have the mind to bring this into like this concept and this framework and build out the framework and get the pieces together. But there are people that have the resources, snap the finger, boom, go.
Who are waiting for purpose.
They're waiting for purpose, and they're waiting for someone who has some level of resources as well, so that they know they can trust you with their resources.
100%.
And that's the big piece, is like, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to just find the perfect inventor that's just going to give us the money to buy this land, and we're just going to do whatever we want, and we're going to sing Kumbaya to the end of the day. No.
Who are you talking about? I'm just kidding.
Exactly. But let's be honest. That's not going to happen. So how do we make it happen? We get to the third bridge. People that have money respect other people that have money, because it takes effort to get there.
Who understand money and business as well. Like no one's just going to trust someone with a shit ton of money where they know that it's going to go nowhere. I mean, people who have money are even if they seem loving and jovial and all this stuff, they're not just going to go into some willy-nilly investment without knowing that they're going to recoup their money, let alone interest and or some form of a dividend where they're going to actually accrue
because it has
more.
to regenerate.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's part of the infinite model.
And if they understand inflation too, they're not just going to let it sit for how many years and depreciate. Come on.
You have to continually produce value over time.
Yeah.
And with inflation, the clock speeds up. So it's
Right.
like, oh, okay, the clock's speeding up. How do I go from where I'm at to continually multiplying value? And then those people that have mastered that concept but lack purpose and now are sitting on however much are like, okay, they seem like they've got it figured out, right? And then sometimes those people will come in and be like, nah, they ain't got it. They were just showing like they got it.
Yeah.
But then sometimes those people meet people that have those pure hearts, that have the minds to envision, and that have the will to work every single day to make it happen. And those people are allies.
Yeah.
They're not looking at us as employees.
Yeah.
So if you're a visionary, if you're someone that wants to create these things, we're looking for allies. We're looking for people that can do what we can do, maybe not at the scale yet, but they have the potential and the will to make it happen. That's how our world's going to change. It's not going to come from like, oh, I'm a magician or I'm a magical human being who can manifest. Let me find some rich dude and con him out of his money and then blow all of his money and mismanage it. And then now I failed on my vision and now he's upset and now we're not friends. It's like, no, like... build the capacity and competency necessary to bring your vision to life.
Which is the integral way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And
it's
then no matter
part
what,
of the path.
even if it fails, you're good.
Yeah.
Because you're still you.
Yeah.
You still have the skills.
You did the best you could.
Exactly.
It's not like you're trying to one up someone or just try to be in like this belief mindset where you're just like caught up in the hype, like, oh, this is going to be great. Like there actually has to be metrics. It's just like building a house. Like you're not going to, and this is the thing. A lot of humans on this earth, especially when I talk about earth, I feel like it's mostly within America, but I feel like the stupidity is starting to get more widespread. But so many of us don't have we have a romanticized understanding and conception of what it would take to do something like build a house or build a business or something like that. Most have absolutely no idea. No idea. And that's one of the funny things is that a lot of times people who have actually owned and operated, run, built a business will be completely in a different mindset and framework of someone who's always been an employee, right? And there's a certain level of trust and respect that's earned and garnered through not only taking those risks, but also having to dive into the nitty-gritty of everything that it takes. Because if you think this is how much it takes, and then you see on the surface how much it takes, and then you actually do the thing, that's like 3, 5, 10-fold what you might have anticipated it to be. You know what I mean? And so when we're talking about going through and seeing everything through and doing the integral thing, it's not only necessary, but it's something that the individuals who have already gone to that level know, and so they're able to feel and respect it to the point where it actually like, it makes sense and you can smell it from a mile away. It's like someone who, I don't know, hasn't done men's work. Well, that's not a good analogy because not everyone's done men's work. But, it's something that once you know. If you've been in a profession for long enough, you can tell when someone's is a veteran in it and someone's a newbie. You know what I mean? In either case, I completely agree. And I think that there's a way for us to change and affect the world in a way that, once again, comes in the sense of reframing, in the sense of aligning and just turning the dial a bit. I don't think it has to crash and burn, and I don't think that. I think that all of those who are caught up in that mentality are just hurt, and also, abiding by what society and the media would dictate and so forth, in this very rebellious, destructive, glamorizing destruction and rebellion. And I think that what we're doing is a part of that solution. I feel like I don't even know how much longer it's going to last, honestly. I felt like, we'll be in this battle for a while, but I feel like people are starting to really wake up to it now because it's just getting so severe that individuals like yourself who are talking about these types of things, it's the type of solution that people are wanting because they're like, okay, great, there's a problem. Now what do we do? Right? And I feel like just as medicine is starting to become more integrated, I think the medicine of how cultures in antiquity have operated in regards to the land, like Native Hawaiian cultures, Native American culture. We just had, Killers of the Flower Moon, you know what I mean? Potentially going to have the first Native American to ever win a Grammy? I don't know. That's huge. Like, we're fucking in America and we've never had a Native American win a Grammy, right? See what I mean? So I feel like things are starting to eke their way in, and maybe if it wasn't for the wokeness, Killers of the Flower Moon wouldn't have existed, even though it's not necessarily woke. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain things that are allowing for the flow of more pivotal, powerful things to have space to land, potentially. So it's almost like perhaps the distortion is allowing for the more clarified version of the thing to land.
The truth can't be beaten.
No. And that was one of the things that I was trying to remember. What was the thing that I wanted to say was, you were talking about earlier about being vegan and like, you need to be here. Like, so, I was vegan for 10 years. You were vegan for how long?
I guess like 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing that you said was like, you started eating eggs and dairy on island?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been eating mostly local back at home. Do my best to get local eggs. And then like there's raw farms in California. So it's really interesting. California is so like dynamic with like craziness, but then also like they have like raw farms, which is like a good brand that is throughout most of Los Angeles and California. And so they have the raw cheddar. So I basically just eat raw dairy if I am going to eat dairy. And then I just smash eggs like all the time, basically. So like, and what I've found is like, it's really important that the nervous system can ground and really connect with the earth here, because a lot of people are like, well, how are you doing? Like when I listed off my schedule, right? It's like, and you listed off your schedule. It's like, how are you executing on that? I'm executing on it because I have stability within my mitochondria to continually produce energy to keep me fueled long term. Yeah. Right. So at the end of the day, your beliefs if your beliefs like don't line up with your mission, like that was what I had to accept, is like, okay, I believe that like this is the best, but then I have this mission over here and it requires me to be like on earth. So how am I going to get from here, a really ungrounded, mineral deficient state, lacking energy and taking more naps than I need to like a strong, purposeful, dynamic, intensity driven energy that's necessary to not only hunt the animal and like bring the kill back home, but also protect the people I love. Because if I'm dealing with some string bean who's trying to talk to me all funny, it's like, what are you really going to do, bro? Like, I'm just saying.
And on island, that's much more of a potential than out here on the mainland, because they'll just shoot you out here. They won't actually fight you. Over on island, they scrap.
They'll scrap.
They scrap, yeah. Which is great. That's how it used to be.
When honor was a thing.
You know what I mean? Yeah, when you're not going to get stabbed in your back or gunned down. Yeah. And I just wanted to touch on that, and talking about veganism, being a post 10-year vegan, and still figuring out the integration between like eating animal proteins, also being able to like substantiate having a decent amount of musculature while also trying to be lean, while also recovering, while also being able to perform, which is a whole freaking balance that I'm still very much an amateur in learning. Because all my life in judo growing up, like we'd eat a big dinner before going to judo at night, and it would screw me up. And I was like, why am I so sluggish? Blah, blah, blah. I should have been fasting. So dumb. Anyways, point being, when you talk about, just needing to be here, a lot of people are vegan, and I have clients who are like this because they're what it was for me, and I've related this to them, because they're like, how did you stop? Why can you eat animals? How could you hunt animals? All these things. It's like, for one, if I didn't have to be cruel, I would love that. But life is cruel and life is beautiful. But there is a certain level of, and this once again lends itself to grief and connecting to gratitude, right? Being able to be grateful for something, being able to pray over it and be like, wow, okay, thank you for being able to feed my family, my loved ones. Like, there's something there that's so like, oh, like, thank you. It's like someone giving their life for you to protect your family. It's like the similar thing. Like if I had my family here and some guy was coming attacking and you lay down your life for us, me being like, I'm sorry, bro. You're like, it's okay. I love you. Thank you. It's like, that same feeling is like the feeling that we can have for the food that we hunt and kill. You know what I mean? But with that, the one thing that came up, and I told them, was that like, there's a certain level of facing our own mortality there that a lot of us run away from. And I did as well. It was like, I don't want anything to die, but it's like, but yet I wanted to live forever. Or I wanted to live longer than most because I was running from my own death and trying to be as healthy as I could, and it was the right way to do it. And my mom had rheumatoid arthritis, and I thought, water fasting and being vegan is the way. And then Jordan Peterson's daughter heals herself through being carnivore. And I was like, what the fuck? Point being, like you're saying, in order for you to have the capacity that you have, not you always have the capacity to be able to, choose reality, and create everything. But in order to actually like function in this human vessel optimally and fully be able to do the things you do, it's like, what will that take? And is that worth the potential quote unquote sacrifice and or whatever you want to call it in you choosing to eat? And you're eating eggs and dairy. I mean, eggs is like the periods of the chicken. They're going to lay in regardless, right? So like vegans who don't want to eat eggs, you're being dumb. Like, get chickens, love them, allow them to just give you eggs because it's good for you. But is it all worth you being able, will you have more impact? And we agreed on this, but we will have more impact if we show up to our fullest self, and the amount of animals that are utilized and or eggs or whatever it is, in order for us to be at our most optimal self, in order to spread grief, the lessons in grief, in order to get gratitude, right? In order to be humble, in order to be creators, in order to be embodied, is ultimately infinitely more valuable than us being like, I'm through me being vegan, I'm creating change, when avocado toast and avos with like the cartel, taking over and, messing up the livelihood of those legacy farmers, as well as all the animals that are eviscerated through industrial monoculture farming. It's just, there's no running from the potential suffering and or pain that's caused throughout the world. And yet there's a way for us to do it in honor. There's a way for us to do it sustainably, where like you kill the deer and you're not just like, let's just throw away the meat, the hamburger. You're like, no, it's hard to hunt the deer. We're going to utilize this whole thing. So through us being able to connect deeper into that. And I feel like that's also one of the things that has come up for me recently, is that, because one of my clients was saying, I can never kill an animal. I can never do this. I'm like, and why it's so hard, and how I was saying earlier that for some of these people, they've lived with it their whole life. The reason why our minds over here are so skewed, especially in the past several generations, the reason why we're so caught up in running away from grief and stuff, is because we've had the opportunity and we've become comfortable with it. Yep. When we buy our meat packaged in the farm, in the market, and then we all of a sudden recognize what it's from, and we're like, we're traumatized because we weren't realizing it the whole time. But if we were fully there the whole time, and if we were actually able to be grateful for it and have proper ritual and ceremony in order for us to actually like feel okay with what we're doing and be purposeful, then it wouldn't be that way, right?
And starvation isn't a thing here for most people.
So true.
Right? So if you're like concerned like, I'm going to starve, like things can change when like, the harvest didn't come in, we got a cow, and my son is literally like he's like literally looking malnourished. Yeah. It's like, do I kill our cow? Yeah. Even though we gave it a name or whatever? Like, like, do I kill it because my son's got to eat?
Give it a name or whatever.
Do I want my son to die, or do I want the cow to die? And that's the thing. We live in the Western world where we have a lot more privilege and opportunity here. And we've forgotten how far, like how kind of a short of distance we traveled from the fact that we were still surviving, and a lot of the rest of the world is still attempting to survive.
100%.
Now, the plant-based diet, one thing I will say is it does increase one's sensitivity, which can be very useful up until a certain point.
Agreed.
Right? So that's the main thing, is like, I'm more in support of like, okay, cool, have a day where you kind of just eat plants. Sometimes that happens for me, and I like notice, I'm like,
yeah, or just
I
fast.
Really eat anything. I'm like, or just fast. Like that's another great way to increase your sensitivity, and it has so many benefits for you. So it's like, there is credence in the necessity to increase sensitivity. The problem is you got a bunch. So I'm about to say some stuff. You got a bunch of soy boys who are way too sensitive. That are we call them like snags. Like the sensitive new age guys. Yeah. And like sometimes they show up to the events and we're like, oh, okay, here we go.
I know. Yeah.
And it's like, cool. Well, this person's never really like actually has zero capacity pretty much. So even though they feel everything and they're in tune with their emotions, they have no capacity. They're floating with the wind.
Yeah.
And like, it's pretty easy to kind of like send them into emotional turmoil because they have no capacity. Right. And so what working with grief does is increase one's capacity in general, which we've been exploring this entire podcast.
Agreed.
With what you just related it to, it's like, yeah, if you take the life of that animal and you're like there, and you're like, that grief is online for you.
Yeah.
But right, that grief is informed by a sense of gratitude for the fact that you get to feed your kid and it doesn't, and your kid doesn't starve.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you are plant-based, that's great. But if you're plant-based from a like place where it's like clearly deficient, like I have a friend and it just, I can see it manifesting as like a bit of like neurotic energy in a way.
That's what I was for so long. Yeah.
And that instability doesn't create good relationships for that person either.
No, it doesn't.
And so even if at one point, right, it's like some people might be like, well, in Egypt we ate like this, or as ascended beings we ate like that. And I'm not going to argue that. Yeah. But we live in a time where we're at the changing of ages. Yeah. The turning from darkness to light. Like it's not a light switch. No. The dial is slowly being turned generation after generation. So when my kids and their kids and their kids and their kids and their kids don't have to deal with the stress and can reduce their capacity, then go into that space because your sensitivity will allow you to access more of the beingness, right? And that's what's up there, and that's great. But right now, we're not there yet. Yeah. So we got to admit that we're not there yet. And we got to do what's necessary to get there, period. Agreed. Because people didn't sacrifice for us to just piss away the opportunity to change the world.
Amen. Oh, yep. Agreed. With that being said, how can people find you, bro? How can people connect with you? Let them know.
I'm on Instagram at pineal_purity. And then where else am I? Yeah, I'm just there mostly. Yeah. So come there. And then I also am working on a few different courses that I'm going to be releasing in the next few months to bring people through actually grounded, tangible change. Not any of this like foo-foo, flow stuff. And we're going to get into like the nitty-gritty of it. And then also I'm doing coaching as well for men and women. For men, it's obvious, like we've been working together, but for women, it's really about providing that masculine presence and objective guidance point. Cool. So then that way, certain patterns can just be nipped in the butt. Yeah. I'm not going to show up and be like, yo, the reason why you're upset is because the stars are like doing this thing. Like, no. The reason why you're upset is because we're not looking at something. So we're going to look at this together and maybe just explore it. And if it's not clear, then we'll give it some time to breathe, and then maybe it'll show itself again in another situation, and we can explore that. So coaching, Instagram, Sacred Sons.
Which all of that will be linked in the bottom. Even if right now it hasn't come out yet, I'll put it down there once it has. This is the first time. I'll just talk to this one because yours has now stopped recording because we've gone over 200 minutes, which is impressive. Nice. This has been the longest, but also the most effortless. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this with me. It's been a pleasure, and also I'm just so grateful to be able to be with you. You know, used to be here all the time. Now you come on, you know.
I gotta listen to where I'm supposed to be, and
I agree. I'm glad you're there.
Looking to bring more of what's there here and less of what's here there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, this has been an awesome pod. Thank you for coming. A magnanimous being, a legend, Kyle Jones. Thank you. Thank you, bro. Appreciate you. Till next time, this has been the Magnanimous Collective. I'm your host once again, Sean Kubota. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Shoots.
Oh, that was a marathon.
Dude, let's go. What is 200 minutes like over 3 hours? Like, let me see.
60 times
3 hours.
3. It's almost 4 hours. Holy shit.
Holy shit, what time is it? Like 4 p.m.
I don't know. There's no light.